Hey there, tonight we're exploring ancient Persia's bustling marketplace, where the truth is, navigating the chaos of shouting merchants and haggling over silk could easily leave you overwhelmed and utterly out of your element. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. You're jolted awake by the cacophony of 1,000 voices, like the world's largest alarm clock, all set to maximum volume. Welcome to the marketplace of ancient Persia, circa 500 BCE, where the concept of quiet morning is as alien as Wi-Fi. You're smack in the middle of one of history's booming trade hubs, a place so strategically located it could make a chess player weep with envy. Sitting pretty at the crossroads of the Silk Road and the Royal Road, this market is less a neighborhood shopping spot and more an economic juggernaut connecting continents. It's the ancient equivalent of a global shopping network, minus the free shipping. The geography is no accident. Persia knew what it was doing. This market might be your first stop, but it's actually the last link in a sophisticated chain stretching from China to the Mediterranean. Silk, spices, precious metals, textiles, everything your ancient heart might desire is right here, albeit at a price that might make even Jeff Bezos clutch his pearls. And it's not just about the goods, it's about the people. Merchants from India, Arabia, even the far-off lands of Greece, all converge here, bringing not just wares but whispers of distant lands and the occasional spicy gossip. As you wander through the labyrinthine stalls, you'll notice the market seems to have something from everywhere and for everyone, assuming you can navigate this maze without getting swindled. Over there, a dazzling array of silks in colors so vibrant they could make a peacock blush. Each bolt of fabric has traveled thousands of miles, probably on the back of a camel who, let's be real, deserves more credit than it gets. But before you reach for your wallet, brace yourself. A single roll of this luxurious silk might set you back a small fortune, say 20 silver coins, which in today's money could fund a nice weekend trip or a hefty credit card bill. You think you're good at haggling? Think again. Your modern-day skills are about as useful here as a snowplow in the desert. In this world, bargaining is an art form, an intricate dance of words and wit. The merchants are veterans, having honed their skills through generations. They'll size you up before you even open your mouth, like poker players reading a tell. You might be able to buy a clay pot for a couple of copper coins if you play your cards right, but good luck getting that down to a single coin unless you've got the silver tongue of a bard. Let's not forget the spices, bags upon bags of them. The air is thick with the aroma of cinnamon, cardamom, and saffron, each scent a story of distant lands and exotic adventures. But while your senses are in heaven, your finances may soon be in hell. Saffron, the gold of spices, can set you back as much as 15 silver coins per pound. That's right, more expensive than some of the silks. And why, you ask? Because each delicate thread must be painstakingly harvested by hand, reminding you that luxury has always demanded a hefty price tag. As you navigate the bustling streets, let's debunk a popular myth. The idea that ancient markets were quaint and charming gatherings of simple folk selling handmade goods. The reality, these were sophisticated economic engines vital to the Persian Empire's prosperity. The empire didn't just stumble upon this success, it engineered it with precision. By investing in infrastructure like the Royal Road, Persia ensured that goods could move quickly and efficiently, allowing the marketplace to thrive. It was the FedEx of ancient times, minus the tracking numbers. The marketplace also provides a snapshot of the Persian economy's reliance on trade. Unlike societies that depended heavily on agriculture alone, Persia was a cosmopolitan hub where trade routes were the veins and the markets were the beating heart. The goods weren't just commodities, they were symbols of power and reach. The more exotic your wares, the more influence you wielded. It was a game of economic chess, and Persia was Barbie Fisher. But let's not romanticize it too much. The market can be as unforgiving as it is fascinating. Behind every stall, there's a story of sweat, toil, and sometimes exploitation. Those who couldn't afford the luxuries often found themselves bartering for necessities. And let's face it, Not everyone was walking away with a silk robe or a pound of saffron. For many, a simple loaf of bread or a handful of dates was the pinnacle of the day's acquisitions. So, as the sun climbs higher and the market buzz intensifies, take a moment to soak it all in. You're part of a grand tapestry woven through trade, culture, and human ambition. But remember, surviving a day here isn't for the faint of heart or the light of purse. Ancient Persia's marketplace is a thrill ride of economic prowess, and you're barely halfway through. Hold tight, because there's more history to unravel as the day unfolds. But hold on to your sandals, because this marketplace isn't just about what you can buy or sell. It's a living, breathing Tower of Babel, buzzing with languages from every corner of the Achaemenid Empire. Picture this: traders haggling over silk prices in Old Persian, while the next stall over, a Greek merchant is trying to convince a Babylonian that his olive oil is worth its weight in gold, or at least in silver shekels. You might think you're a United Nations mixer, minus the diplomatic immunity, and with way more incense. And speaking of languages, let's not gloss over the logistical nightmare that is currency exchange in a world where coins are as standardized as your local flea market's prices. The Achaemenid Empire stretched from modern-day Turkey through Egypt and over to the Indian subcontinent. That's like trying to manage a PTA meeting with everyone speaking a different dialect of "we want what's best for the kids." Except here, they're talking drachmas, shekels, and darics. Those darics, by the way, are gold coins introduced by Darius the Great, weighing in at about 8 grams of gold each. Fancy, right? But try explaining that to a merchant from Lydia who's used to dealing in status. Imagine trying to buy a bolt of silk. You reach for your pouch, only to remember that the 20 silver coins you need aren't the same in Athens as they are in Persepolis. It's like trying to pay with Monopoly money and hoping the banker doesn't notice. The marketplace thrived on trust and savvy negotiation skills, a high-wire act that would make even modern-day Forks traders break a sweat. You think today's currency exchange rates are confusing? Try doing mental math when the value of your coins changes with every merchant you meet. It's no wonder that some traders carried around scales, not to weigh their options, but to literally weigh their money. But in this sea of chaos lies opportunity, a chance for the savvy trader to capitalize on regional discrepancies. After all, what's a little economic instability when you've got the chance to make a tidy profit by selling Egyptian papyrus to a scribe from Susa? The Achaemenid Empire understood this, employing a cadre of bureaucrats to streamline trade across their vast domain. They didn't invent the red tape, mind you, but they sure perfected it. Now, if you're wondering how the empire managed to keep this economic beast running smoothly, the answer lies in its infrastructure, those legendary roads. The Royal Road, stretching over 500 miles, was the ancient expressway for merchants, messengers, and yes, even the occasional conquering army. Herodotus, the ancient historian, claimed that it took messengers just 9 days to traverse the Royal Road, thanks to a relay system of horses. That's faster than your average Amazon Prime delivery, though without the option of leaving the package with a neighbor. Yet, for all its bureaucratic genius, the empire wasn't without its hiccups. Take the postal system, for example. Efficient, sure, but not without its quirks. Ever try sending a letter across an empire? The message might have to be translated several times before reaching its destination, thanks to the linguistic buffet that was the Achaemenid Empire. It's like a game of telephone, except in this version, the stakes are high, and the message might just be instructions for a royal decree. And let's not overlook the human element in this bustling marketplace. Behind every stall is a story, a family who's been trading lapis lazuli from Afghanistan for generations, or a Phoenician sailor peddling his wares after surviving yet another Mediterranean storm. These traders aren't just selling goods, they're selling tales of adventure and survival, of economic strategy and sheer grit. It's the ancient equivalent of a TED talk, only with fewer slides and more olive oil stains. But the romantic notion of the marketplace as a cultural melting pot can sometimes obscure the harsher realities. Beneath the vibrant tapestry of voices and colors lies a world of economic disparity. For every wealthy trader flaunting his exotic wares, there's a struggling vendor just scraping by, hoping today's sales will be enough to feed his family. The marketplace is a microcosm of the empire itself, glorious, complex, and sometimes unforgiving, So as you navigate this ancient bazaar, trying not to lose your bearings or your coin purse, remember that you're walking through history's grand experiment in globalization. The Achaemenid Empire was a pioneer in this chaotic dance of trade and culture, and the marketplace was its stage, a place where the world's diversity converged in a cacophony of commerce. But we're just scratching the surface here. There's more to this story, so stay tuned as we delve deeper into the heart of ancient Persia's marketplace, where every transaction is a tale waiting to be told. As you weave through the thrumming heart of ancient Persia's marketplace, it doesn't take long before the intoxicating swirl of sights, sounds, and smells grabs you by the senses. Picture this: a kaleidoscope of colors as vibrant as a peacock's daydream, merchants shouting their wares in a symphony of languages, and the air thick with an exotic blend of spices that could make your nose do a double take. Welcome to the sensory overload that is the Persian Bazaar. Let's start with the olfactory orchestra that's assaulting your nostrils. The aroma of freshly ground spices is as thick as a Persian carpet, and just as intricate. Saffron, cardamom, and cumin, each with a price tag that could make a modern gourmet blush, float through the air, their provenance as diverse as the sellers hawking them. The saffron alone, harvested from the delicate crocus flower, is so labor-intensive that a pound of it might cost you 15 to 20 silver coins. It's the caviar of the spice world, and like all luxury goods, it whispers of status and opulence. But spices are just the tip of the culinary iceberg. The market is a veritable cornucopia of edibles, each stall a snapshot of Persian society's gastronomic soul. On one hand, you have the lavish, spice-laden dishes of the nobility. Think of royal banquets where the wine flows as freely as the gossip, and every meal is a chance to flaunt one's wealth. On the other, you have the staples that keep the empire's vast populace ticking. Wheat, barley, and dates, the unsung heroes of the Persian diet. Now, let's chew on those grains for a moment. Wheat and barley weren't just food. They were the backbone of Persia's agricultural might. In an empire that spanned from the Nile to the Indus, these crops were cultivated with military precision. Why? Because controlling the food supply meant controlling the masses. Forget gold. In the ancient world, bread was power. And while we're on the topic of cereal grains, let's bust a myth. The ancient Persian diet wasn't all about glamorous feasts. For the average Joe, or should I say, average Cyrus, a meal might consist of a simple flatbread made from barley, maybe garnished with a sprinkle of salt if you were feeling fancy. Yet, despite its simplicity, this humble fare was the glue holding the empire together. Barley was more than just bread. It was the liquid courage of the day, fermented into beer that was probably safer to drink than the water. Imagine a world where your daily bread and brew were not just sustenance, but survival. Now that's a diet plan with historical weight. But before you start romanticizing these ancient grains, consider the culinary culture shock of preservation techniques that might make your modern palate wince. Without the luxury of refrigeration, the Persians turned to salt and sun for their food storage solutions. Fish and meat were often dried or salted to last through the sweltering summers. It's a testament to human ingenuity, sure, but let's not kid ourselves. Your contemporary taste buds might not be thrilled by the texture of sun-dried camel meat. And speaking of taste buds, the Persian market doesn't shy away from bold flavors. Pickled vegetables, tart pomegranates, and pungent garlic feature prominently, challenging any preconceived notions of bland ancient fare. The Persians had a penchant for sweet and sour combinations, a culinary yin and yang that modern fusion chefs would applaud. But don't be fooled. The refinement of Persian cuisine came with its own set of social hierarchies. The exotic fruits and spices that graced royal tables were a far cry from the everyday pottage of peasants. Let's not forget the bustling trade in animal products. Livestock wasn't just for eating. It was an economic asset on 4 legs. Sheep, goats, and cattle were raised not only for their meat, but for their wool and hides, essential materials in a world where clothing wasn't just fashion but necessity. The leather trade was booming, and if you think today's designer handbags are pricey, try bartering for a high-quality hide in a market where the currency might be as varied as the livestock itself. Amidst this culinary carnival, the market is also a crucible of social interaction, a place where the empire's classes collide. Nobles might send their servants to haggle over saffron, while a farmer exchanges barley for a few clay pots. The market is both a stage and a mirror, reflecting the empire's vast social and economic spectrum. Here, amidst the clinking of derricks and the chatter of tradesmen, the ordinary and extraordinary rub shoulders, each transaction a small thread in the grand tapestry of Persian life. Yet, for all its vibrancy, the market is also a testament to the empire's unyielding pragmatism. The Achaemenid rulers understood that an empire runs on its stomach, and they ensured that the agricultural backbone of Persia was as strong as its military might. This wasn't just about feeding people. It was about feeding an empire's ambition. From the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the rugged mountains of Iran, the land was cultivated with a strategic eye, every field a potential weapon in the arsenal of empire. So, while you're marveling at the market's sensory overload, remember that you're also witnessing a finely tuned machine, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless march of civilization. Sure, the romance of ancient Persia is hard to resist, but behind the spices and silks lies a world as harsh as it is fascinating. The marketplace is a microcosm of the empire itself, a vibrant mosaic of culture, commerce, and survival. But hold onto your hat. This historical ride is far from over. There's more to uncover in this ancient world where every scent, sound, and sight tells a story that resonates through the ages. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complexities of Persia's storied past, because this history lesson is just heating up. Now, as you elbow your way through the crowded bazaar, let's zoom in on the real stars of this grand historical show: the merchants, the laborers, and the occasional royal inspector. These folks aren't just background extras in the Persian Empire's blockbuster. They're the unsung heroes navigating the tangled web of commerce, regulation, and social hierarchy. And trust me, it's a drama worthy of its own Netflix series. First up, the merchants. Picture them as the ancient equivalent of Wall Street brokers, minus the suits and insider trading scandals. These savvy traders are the lifeblood of the marketplace, hustling everything from Egyptian papyrus to Indian spices. They're the OG influencers, wielding economic clout like a scepter. In Persia, being a merchant wasn't just a job, it was a power play. The more exotic your goods, the higher your social standing. And don't be fooled by the romantic notion of the solitary trader. These guys were often part of family dynasties, with trade secrets passed down like precious heirlooms. But while the merchants are busy sealing deals, let's not forget the laborers who keep the wheels of this economic machine turning. They're the ones unloading the caravans, setting up stalls, and frankly, doing the heavy lifting so the merchants can shine. In this social pyramid, laborers are the foundation, often working dawn to dusk for a pittance. A skilled artisan might earn a few silver coins a day, while an unskilled laborer could expect even less. It's a tough life, but crucial to the market's relentless rhythm. Now, let's talk about the royal inspectors, the ancient world's version of your friendly neighborhood auditor. These officials roamed the markets, ensuring that the emperor's taxes were collected and that regulations were followed to the letter. The Persian Empire ran on taxes, and the marketplace was a gold mine, or at least a silver mine, of revenue. Merchants paid taxes on their goods, and failure to comply could mean hefty fines or worse. And by worse, I mean punishments that make modern tax evasion penalties look like a slap on the wrist. Imagine getting your hand chopped off for shortchanging the emperor. It's enough to make anyone double-check their accounting. While we're on the topic of taxes, let's dissect the empire's tax system. The Achaemenid rulers weren't just militaristic masterminds. They were also financial wizards. Taxes were levied in various forms: tribute from conquered lands, taxes on land and produce, and of course, the marketplace. This revenue funded everything from grand palaces to military campaigns. Forget the IRS. The real taxmen of Persia were a force to be reckoned with. Fail to pay, and you'd find yourself in a world of trouble, possibly facing the dreaded eye for an eye justice system. And let's not skip the societal hierarchy that permeates this marketplace. It's a veritable caste system, with merchants near the top and laborers at the bottom. But hang on to your modern sensibilities, because the gender roles might just make you cringe. In ancient Persia, the marketplace was predominantly male-dominated, with women playing supporting roles, often out of sight. They might manage a stall in a man's absence or sell goods like textiles and pottery, but the big deals were brokered by men. It's a stark reminder of the gender dynamics that have shaped history's economic landscapes. But before you write off the marketplace as a man's world, consider the influential women who defied these norms. While not common, some women rose to prominence, particularly in textile trades. They managed workshops, employed laborers, and even exported goods. These exceptions to the rule highlight the complexities of gender roles in ancient Persia, where power and influence could transcend the societal norms if you knew how to play the game. So, as you navigate the bustling marketplace, remember that it's not just about the goods on display. It's a microcosm of Persian society, a place where wealth and status are as much on sale as the silk and saffron. The social dynamics here are as intricate as the empire itself, a delicate balance of power, regulation, and human ambition. And while the romantic allure of the market is hard to resist, the reality is as gritty as the sand under your sandals. Stay tuned, because there's more to unravel in this epic tale of trade, culture, and survival. The marketplace is just one chapter in Persia's storied history, a place where every transaction is a piece of a larger puzzle. So, keep your eyes and ears open, because the next twist in this historical saga is just around the corner. As the sun begins its gradual dip below the horizon, the market transforms from a bustling hive of activity into a scene painted in hues of gold and shadow. The frenetic energy of the day gives way to a softer, almost reflective buzz. It's the ancient world's version of the closing bell, and as the merchants begin to pack up their wares, you can almost hear history whispering through the rustling tarps and clinking of scales being stowed away. You've survived a day in the marketplace of ancient Persia, a place where commerce was as dynamic as the empire itself, and where every transaction was a cog in the vast machine of the Achaemenid economic juggernaut. The marketplace was more than just a commercial hub. It was a key player in the grand chess game of the Persian Empire's prosperity. Picture the empire as a colossal beast, with the marketplace as both its beating heart and its voracious stomach, constantly needing to be fed with goods from far and wide. It was here that the empire's wealth was displayed, its power flexed, and its influence expanded. The market was a theater of trade, where the empire's economic strategies unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. The Achaemenid rulers understood that controlling trade meant controlling power, and they wielded this understanding like a masterful puppeteer, pulling the strings of an empire that stretched over 3 continents. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. Sure, the idea of a bustling Persian bazaar evokes images of silken treasures and exotic spices, but the reality was a bit more, shall we say, gritty. For every bolt of silk that dazzled the eyes, there was a caravan driver nursing blisters from weeks on the road, and for every bag of saffron that tantalized the nose, there were laborers who toiled long hours for mere coppers. The exotic allure often associated with these ancient markets glosses over the sweat and toil that kept them running. Merchants might have been the rock stars of this world, but behind the scenes, it was the unsung laborers who ensured that the show went on. Digging deeper, the Persian marketplace was a crucible for cultural exchange, a place where ideas mingled as freely as goods. It was a live-action episode of globalization, the ancient edition, where traders didn't just swap silk for silver, but also stories, customs, and innovations. Imagine the intellectual cross-pollination that could occur when a Greek philosopher's scroll encountered a Babylonian astronomer's calculations, all while a Persian merchant brokered a deal over a cup of pomegranate wine. The marketplace was a melting pot of cultures long before the term was coined, a place where the boundaries of nations blurred into a tapestry of human experience. Now, you might be wondering how a modern-day visitor like yourself would fare in this world of ancient commerce. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't last a day without a serious culture shock. For starters, the marketplace's sensory overload would be enough to send your brain into a tailspin. The noise level alone, with its cacophony of languages and haggling cries, could make a New York City street seem serenely quiet. And let's not even get started on the currency confusion. In a place where bartering was king, and coins from different regions were as varied as the merchants themselves, you'd need a PhD in ancient numismatics just to buy a loaf of bread without getting swindled. Speaking of bread, the basic staples of life here would be another hurdle. Accustomed as you are to the sanitized, prepackaged convenience of modern supermarkets, the raw authenticity of sun-dried meats and fermented grains might be more of a surprise than a delight. And while you might romanticize the idea of sampling ancient delicacies, the reality of preservation methods, think salt, sun, and smoke, might leave your taste buds yearning for a simple slice of pizza. But let's not end on that note. For all its challenges, the marketplace of ancient Persia was a marvel of human ingenuity and ambition. It was a place where the empire's grand narratives played out in the everyday exchanges of silk for silver, where the dreams of wealth and power danced alongside the harsh realities of toil and survival. The marketplace was a microcosm of the empire's vastness, a testament to the Achaemenid ability to blend commerce with culture, to turn trade into an art form that transcended borders. As the last of the light fades, and the marketplace settles into the quiet of night, you're left with a sense of awe at the sheer complexity of it all. The Persian marketplace was a living, breathing organism, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for trade, innovation, and connection. And while you might be glad to return to the comforts of the modern world, there's something undeniably compelling about this ancient world of commerce, a place where every deal was a step in the dance of history. In the end, surviving a day in ancient Persia's marketplace was about more than just navigating a maze of stalls and haggling for goods. It was about understanding the intricate web of human relationships and economic strategies that underpinned one of history's greatest empires. It was about recognizing the marketplace not just as a site of commerce, but as a crucible of culture and a catalyst for change. And as you reflect on this whirlwind of sensory experiences and historical insights, one thing is clear. The legacy of Persia's markets continues to echo through the ages, a reminder of the enduring power of trade to shape the world. The rooster's crow cuts through the morning mist, a medieval alarm clock that doesn't come with a snooze button. Welcome to the bustling world of a medieval manor, where the air is as crisp as the social hierarchy. In this corner of the world, the manor is the stage, and everyone's got a role to play. Whether you're a peasant or a noble, your life is tethered to this land like a medieval smartphone notification. You can't just ignore it. First off, let's sketch out the geography of the manor. Think of it as the medieval version of a sprawling estate, but without the fancy landscaping. At the center, you've got the manor house, the medieval equivalent of a ritzy penthouse, where the lord lives like the king of his own little universe. Surrounding it are the peasant cottages, not quite luxury condos, but they do the job, if the job is to keep you dry-ish and somewhat warm. These cottages are often cob structures with thatched roofs, cozy if you don't mind the occasional mouse sharing your dinner. Then there's the heart of the manor, the fields. Picture vast open spaces divided into strips by nothing more than the turning of the soil. This is the open field system, and it's not just a clever name. Here, the peasants work their narrow strips of land, a system that makes the term sharing economy sound romantic. But unlike your Uber driver, these peasants aren't going to rate their lord 5 stars. They're part of a finely tuned economic engine where everyone knows their place. It's as communal as a potluck, except everyone brings turnips, and nobody leaves with a full belly. The division of land is as meticulous as a medieval tax record. Each peasant family works several strips scattered across different fields. Why? Because it reduces the risk of total crop failure. If one field throws a tantrum, there's hope the others won't. An average peasant might have a few scattered acres, a patchwork quilt of responsibility. It's a bit like playing the medieval version of Monopoly, except you don't get to keep the hotels, and everyone's rent is paid in sweat and tears. Now, the manor doesn't run itself. Far from it. It's all about agriculture, baby. We're talking wheat, barley, oats, the medieval staples. The manor's economy is a high-stakes game of Farmville, with the lord as the ultimate player. The peasants are the ones ploughing, sowing, and harvesting, in exchange for a small plot to grow their own food and the lord's protection, which is basically the medieval version of a security system. And speaking of work, let's talk about a day in the life. The bell tolls, not just for thee, but for thee to get moving. Sunrise to sunset, that's your workday. None of this 9 to 5 nonsense. You're up and at M, doing everything from ploughing to harvesting to sheep shearing, depending on the season. It's a rotating carousel of back-breaking chores. You might cover a few miles in a day, trudging from field to field, but good luck if you're hoping to earn frequent flyer miles. But what does it cost to keep this medieval merry-go-round spinning? Well, it's not cheap. A manor could cover anywhere from a few hundred to several thousand acres, and every inch needs tending. Lords gotta keep the manor house from collapsing, maintain roads, and make sure the peasants have their tools and seeds. It's a constant juggle of resources, like trying to keep a dozen plates spinning while riding a unicycle. The peasants pay their dues through labor, and sometimes a portion of their harvest. It's like an ancient subscription service where the fees are mandatory and paid in wheat or chickens. And if you think the Lord's just sitting back and reaping the rewards, think again. He's got his own expenses, knights to pay, a manor to maintain, and the occasional royal tax to keep the king happy. Everyone's in this giant balancing act, except there's no safety net if you fall. It's hard work, but there's a rhythm to it. A predictability, even. In a world where chaos can rain down in the form of invasions or famine, the manor offers a semblance of stability. It's a tough life, but it's also a life of community, where everyone plays a part in the survival of the whole. And while the Lord may hold the power, it's the peasants who keep the whole show running, one furrow at a time. So, whether you're tilling the fields or collecting rents, life on the manor is a grindstone that never stops turning. It's more than just a piece of land. It's an entire ecosystem, where every turn of the seasons brings new challenges and opportunities. And while it might not be the fairy tale we often imagine, it's a world where every day is a testament to the grit and tenacity of those who walked before us. And speaking of grit and tenacity, let's really zoom in on the nitty-gritty of a peasant's day on this medieval manor stage. Picture your alarm clock as the sun's first peak over the horizon. If you were hoping for a leisurely breakfast with avocado toast, think again. It's more like a grab-and-go affair with some bread, maybe a bit of cheese if you're lucky. Your energy drink is likely ale. Because fun fact, water wasn't always safe to drink, so ale was the medieval smoothie of choice, even for breakfast. Once you've scarfed down your morning fuel, it's time to dive into a workday that makes a modern 9-to-5 look like a vacation. We're talking sunup to sundown, with a quick break for lunch, if you can call it that. The menu, more bread, perhaps some pottage, a thick stew-like dish, often made with whatever vegetables you can scrounge up, and if the stars align, a bit of bacon or fish. You're not exactly dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant, but this simple fare is your lifeline. Now, what does a day's work actually look like? Well, it's not exactly a one-task wonder. Depending on the season, you might be plowing the fields, sowing seeds, weeding, or bringing in the harvest. Each task is a full-body workout that would make any CrossFit enthusiast weep with envy. But instead of a gym membership, you get the satisfaction of knowing your toil will, hopefully, feed your family for another year. And let's not forget about taxes. Oh, taxes, the eternal burden of peasantry. Your overlord, the manor's big cheese, expects his cut, which is often a hefty portion of your harvest. It's like an ancient form of income tax, but instead of paying in cash, you're handing over bushels of grain or livestock. These obligations vary, but can be as much as a third of your produce. And if you think that's a bum deal, remember, there's no appealing to a medieval IRS. The legend of the free peasant is just that, a legend. Sure, they weren't slaves, but freedom is a flexible term in this context. Feudal obligations kept them on a pretty tight leash. You're bound to the manor like a smartphone to its charger. You can't just up and leave for greener pastures without permission. It's a system that makes the notion of autonomy more myth than reality. You work the land, but the land is owned by someone else. You're not exactly living the medieval dream. And what about those romantic tales of happy peasants dancing around maypoles? Well, those tales skip over the blisters, the aching muscles, and the constant worry about next year's harvest. If there was dancing, it was probably fueled by the occasional festival day, a rare break from the grind. Feast days offered a chance to let loose, enjoy some communal fun, and maybe even roast a pig if the Lord was feeling generous. But these were the exceptions, not the rule. So how much autonomy did these peasants really have? More than serfs, but less than you'd think. They could make decisions about their small plots and household, but their lives were tied inextricably to the manor. They were entrepreneurs in a sense, running a small business that fed into the larger economy of the manor. But their market was limited, and the terms were set by their overlord. The manor system was a complex web of obligations and duties, with everyone from the lowest peasant to the highest lord playing their part. Peasants provided labor and produce, while the lord offered protection and justice, at least in theory. But this protection often meant maintaining the status quo, ensuring the manor continued to function smoothly, rather than offering any real security against, say, a Viking raid. As dusk approaches, the day winds down. The fields grow quiet, and the peasants shuffle back to their cottages, exhausted but resigned. There's a certain rhythm to this life, dictated by the seasons and the cycles of planting and harvest. It's a life of hard work, yes, but also of community, where every member plays a crucial role in the survival of the whole. The romantic tales might gloss over the harsh realities, but there's a gritty nobility in the day-to-day struggles of these medieval folk. They lived in a world without modern conveniences, yet they managed to carve out a life, however constrained, with the resources they had. Their story is a testament to human resilience and adaptability, even when the odds seem stacked against them. And so, as the sun sets and the manor settles into the quiet of evening, the cycle of medieval life begins again. It's a world of contrasts, where myth and reality intertwine, each as integral to the story as the other. As we peel back the layers of legend to reveal the stark truths beneath, we find a world that's as fascinating as it is challenging, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover in this medieval tapestry of life on a manor. The story doesn't end here. It merely pauses, ready to pick up with the next turn of the seasons. So let's leave the muddy fields behind and step into the manor house, where life is supposedly a fairy tale of luxury. Spoiler alert, it's not quite the fantasy you might imagine. Welcome to the world of the noble family, a clan that lives in the lap of medieval luxury, which, by modern standards, is more like a firm pat on the back. First, let's talk about the manor house itself. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a VIP lounge, but with a draft that's more persistent than your last cold. These homes were built from stone or timber, depending on what was locally available, and they made up for their lack of central heating with impressively large fireplaces. The lord and his family lived here, along with a retinue of servants who ensured the gears of this small kingdom kept turning. The lord was the CEO of this feudal enterprise, managing not just the land, but the people who lived on it. While the peasants were up to their elbows in soil, the noble family was busy with duties of their own. The lord of the manor acted as a judge, a manager, and sometimes a military leader. His days were filled with managing disputes, overseeing the collection of rents and taxes, and ensuring the king's interests were looked after. It's a bit like running a startup, where you're the HR, the CFO, and the janitor all rolled into one. And his lady, oh, she wasn't just lounging around in silk gowns. She managed the household, supervised the servants, and in the lord's absence, often took on his responsibilities. This was no idle existence. It was more like a high-stakes game of chess, with the added bonus of potential deadly consequences if you miscalculated. Now, let's debunk a myth, those legendary feasts. Yes, nobles did enjoy lavish banquets, kind that would make your Instagram feed explode. Picture tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, pies, and exotic fruits. But here's the kicker. Medieval hygiene was, to put it politely, a bit lacking. These feasts were often a sensory overload, not just of flavors but of smells. The lack of proper sanitation meant that many manor houses were essentially open invitations for rodents and pests. And the food itself, let's just say they loved their spices, not just for flavor, but to mask the less-than-fresh aroma of the meat. And while we're on the subject of food, let's not forget that the noble diet wasn't exactly heart-healthy. Rich in fats and proteins, it was a cholesterol connoisseur's dream. They had access to ingredients like sugar and spices, which were costly imports from far-off lands. But these luxuries came at a price, literally. A pound of pepper could cost as much as a sheep. And yet, nobles indulged, not just because they enjoyed it, but because it was a way to show off their wealth and status. This was the medieval equivalent of driving a Lamborghini to the local grocery store. But hold your applause. There's irony in abundance. For all their wealth, nobles were often plagued by health issues. The lack of understanding about nutrition and hygiene meant that many nobles suffered from ailments like gout, a condition so common it was known as the rich man's disease. Medicine was a hodgepodge of superstition and rudimentary practices. Bloodletting and leeches were standard treatments, and if you needed surgery, let's hope you had a high pain threshold, because anesthesia wasn't in the medieval medical kit. And forget about privacy. Operations were often public spectacles. The reality is that the wealth of the noble family was inextricably tied to the toil of the peasants. The lord's coffers were filled with the fruits of peasant labor, and this was no socialist utopia. It was a rigid hierarchy where the peasants' hard work supported a lifestyle of luxury for the few at the top. The manor was a microcosm of the wider feudal system, a delicate balance of power and dependency. But let's not just pin the nobles as the villains of this story. They were playing their roles in a system that was as much about survival as it was about power. Feudalism was the political structure of its time, a decentralized network of allegiances that connected the lowliest serf to the most powerful king. The manor was a piece of this puzzle, an economic and social unit that kept the wheels of medieval society turning. And those political power plays, they weren't just about keeping the king happy. They were about maintaining the delicate balance that ensured the noble family's continued prosperity. The noble family also had to navigate a landscape of shifting allegiances and potential conflict. Wars could be as frequent as seasonal changes, and maintaining a retinue of knights was a costly endeavor. These armored warriors were the medieval equivalent of a private security firm, and their protection didn't come cheap. The lord had to ensure his knights were well-equipped and loyal, often rewarding them with land or other incentives. And let's not forget the importance of marriage alliances. Noble families were always on the lookout for advantageous matches for their children, often treating marriage more like a business transaction than a romantic union. These alliances could secure peace or expand territorial influence, making them a critical aspect of a noble strategy for maintaining power. So, while the noble family lived in relative comfort compared to their peasant counterparts, they were also trapped in a system that demanded constant vigilance and strategic thinking. Their lives, like those of their vassals, were dictated by the rhythms of feudal society. And while they might have had the luxury of fine clothes and feasting, they were also bound by the same social and economic structures that kept the entire system in place. In the end, life on a medieval manor was a tapestry of contrast, where opulence and hardship coexisted in a delicate dance. The noble family might have had the benefits of wealth and power, but they were also subject to its demands and pitfalls. They lived in a world where the stakes were as high as the towers of their castles, and where every decision could tip the balance between prosperity and ruin. So, as the candles flicker in the great hall of the manor and the echoes of the day's activities fade, we're left with a picture of a society that was as complex as it was hierarchical. The noble family might have been at the top of this pyramid, but theirs was a life of responsibility and risk, where every feast was tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow's stability depended on today's choices. And with that, we'll close the heavy oak doors of the manor house, leaving the noble family to their nightly routines. But don't worry, we're not done yet. There's still more to uncover in this medieval world of intrigue and survival. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the fascinating intricacies of life on a medieval manor. As we leave the noble family to their nightly routines, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the manor's social dynamics. You might think the manor was a medieval utopia where everyone knew their place and life was as predictable as a Gregorian chant. But hold your horses. This was no feudal fairy tale. Picture a community more like a medieval soap opera, with power plays, alliances, and the occasional scandal. First things first, social interactions between peasants and nobles were as scripted as a Renaissance play, with each side sticking to their lines. Nobles were the stars of the show, while peasants played supporting roles, often without applause or even a decent curtain call. The lord of the manor was like the big boss, a medieval CEO, if you will, and peasants were the workforce, minus the modern perks like health insurance or paid leave. But don't picture the lord as some distant figure lounging in luxury. He was more like the principal of a medieval high school, overseeing everything from land management to justice. Yes, justice was doled out on the manor, and not in some grand courthouse, but in the manor court, a sort of medieval Judge Judy, minus the cameras and catchy theme music. The manor court handled everything from petty theft to land disputes. It was a no-frills affair, often held in the great hall or even outdoors if the weather played nice. The lord, or his appointed steward, presided over these sessions, dispensing justice with as much fairness as the feudal system allowed. It wasn't exactly a high bar, but it was the best they had. Punishments were handed out with a mix of practicality and drama. Fines were common, a hit to the wallet always being a crowd pleaser. For more serious crimes, you might face the stocks, a public shaming that doubled as community theater. Imagine being the medieval version of a Twitter controversy, except you're stuck in a wooden contraption while the townsfolk provide the commentary. Now, while these courts were designed to uphold order, they also reinforced social hierarchies. Nobles often received more lenient sentences, a nod to their status, or maybe just a wink and a nudge. After all, justice is blind, but it often wore a nobleman's cloak. This inequality was as much a part of the system as the manor itself, a reminder of who held the power and who just held the plow. But life wasn't all work and no play. Even in this rigid hierarchy, there were moments of levity. Enter cultural and religious festivals, the medieval equivalent of hitting pause on the daily grind. These events were more than just an excuse to party. They were vital to the community's rhythm, offering a break from toil and a chance to reinforce social bonds. Imagine harvest festivals with tables laden with food, music, and dancing. They were like medieval block parties, where everyone, from the lowliest serf to the lord himself, could let loose. But don't get too caught up in the merriment. These festivals also served as a reminder of your place in the pecking order. The lord might throw a feast, but he didn't exactly sit shoulder to shoulder with the peasants. Social barriers remained intact, even when everyone was dancing to the same tune. Religious festivals brought their own brand of medieval magic. Think of Easter and Christmas, not just as holy days, but as communal gatherings that broke the monotony. They were a time for reflection, yes, but also for community. After all, what better way to celebrate the divine than by coming together as a community, even if that community was tightly bound by feudal strings? Yet, while these festivals were ostensibly about unity, they subtly reinforced the social hierarchy. The church, with its towering spires and incense-filled aisles, was a constant reminder of the divine order, with the clergy often rubbing elbows with the nobility. The peasants, they were more like the congregation in the bleachers, witnessing the spectacle from a respectful distance. And let's not forget the economic implications. Festivals were also a boost to the local economy, offering an opportunity for peasants to sell their wares or trade goods. It was a medieval market day, where the hustle and bustle brought a temporary shift in the daily routine. But even here, the power dynamics played out, with the lord often taking a cut of the profits or taxing the market stalls. So, while festivals and courts might seem like quaint relics of a bygone era, they were the gears that kept the manor's social machinery running smoothly. They reinforced the hierarchy, maintained order, and offered glimpses of joy in a world often overshadowed by toil. They were the medieval equivalent of a well-oiled machine, operating with the precision and predictability that only centuries of tradition could provide. As the echoes of festival music fade and the manor court's judgment rings in the air, we're left with a world of contrasts, a community bound by duty, yet alive with the vibrancy of human spirit. The manor was a microcosm of medieval society, where every interaction, from the fields to the feast, was a reminder of the delicate balance that kept this world turning. Stay tuned, because the story doesn't end here. There's more to uncover in this tapestry of medieval life, where every thread tells a tale of survival, power, and the relentless passage of time. As the echoes of festival music fade, and the manor court's judgment rings in the air, it's time to look beyond the fields and feast days into an era of upheaval, the gradual decline of the manor system. Picture a world where the medieval manor, once the beating heart of feudal society, starts to loosen its grip. It's not so much a dramatic exit as it is a slow unraveling, like a medieval tapestry threadbare from the weight of time. So, how did the manor system, the medieval equivalent of a well-oiled machine, start sputtering? Well, grab your plague masks and buckle up, because we're diving into one of history's most infamous pandemics, the Black Death. This wasn't just a bad cold, it was the medieval apocalypse, a pandemic that made even the Grim Reaper look overworked. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death wiped out an estimated 25 million people in Europe, about one-third of the continent's population. In some places, entire villages vanished like a Snapchat story. The impact on the manor system, catastrophic. With so many peasants gone, fields went untilled and food production plummeted. Suddenly, the peasants who survived found themselves in unprecedented demand. They could bargain for better wages and conditions, a concept as foreign to feudal lords as Wi-Fi. Imagine the manors as medieval ghost towns, with lords desperately trying to hold onto their labor force, only to find that economics, much like death, shows no favoritism. But the plague was just one actor in this medieval drama. Enter the rise of towns and a shift towards a money-based economy. These burgeoning urban centers were bustling hives of trade and commerce, the medieval equivalent of popping up a new Starbucks every block. Towns offered opportunities that manors couldn't match, a taste of freedom for peasants bound by feudal obligations. If you were a peasant with a knack for weaving or brewing, towns were your ticket to a new life, free from the lord's grip. And let's talk money. The feudal system was all about barter, grain for protection, labor for land. But as towns flourished, so did the use of coins. Currency started jingling in pockets, turning wealth from something you could eat to something you could hoard. This shift from a subsistence economy to a commercial one was like swapping out a horse-drawn cart for a shiny new sports car. Suddenly, wealth wasn't just about land. It was about trade, goods, and cold, hard cash. Now, you might be wondering, what about the lords? Were they just twiddling their thumbs while their manors emptied? Not quite. The smarter lords adapted, transitioning from feudal landlords into investors. They leased out land for cash rents instead of labor, turning their estates into profit-driven enterprises. It was a savvy move, akin to a modern landlord going from renting apartments to Airbnb hosting. But not every lord had the foresight or flexibility to change, and many struggled to keep up with the new economic reality. As the manor system waned, the social structure it supported began to morph. The rigid hierarchies of feudalism gave way to a more fluid society, where your position wasn't solely determined by birth. The burgeoning middle class, merchants, artisans, and traders emerged as the new power brokers, challenging the old order with their wealth and influence. It was like watching a game of musical chairs, where suddenly everyone was scrambling for a seat in this brave new world. But hey, let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't a smooth transition. The shift brought its own set of problems: urban overcrowding, disease, and social unrest. Peasants, now with a taste of autonomy, weren't always content to settle for a new kind of servitude in the cities. Revolts were as common as rain, with the most notable being the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 in England. Led by figures like Wat Tyler, this rebellion was a fiery demand for better living conditions and an end to serfdom. Spoiler alert, it ended with heads rolling, quite literally. The decline of the manor system wasn't just a footnote in history. It was a seismic shift that paved the way for the modern world. It set the stage for the Renaissance and the eventual rise of nation-states, laying the groundwork for the capitalism that would dominate the coming centuries. The medieval manor, once a self-contained world, became a relic of the past, its legacy woven into the fabric of modern economic and social structures. Yet, while the manorial system may have crumbled, its impact lingers like the echo of a distant bell. The concept of land ownership, hierarchical structures, and even the idea of community have roots in this feudal past. Today's debates over wealth distribution and labor rights can trace their lineage back to these medieval origins, where power dynamics were as stark as a moonless night. So, as we close this chapter on the medieval manor, let's reflect on its intricate tapestry of survival, power, and change. It was a world of contrasts: grit and nobility, struggle and resilience, myth and reality. The manor may have faded into the annals of history, but its story continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring human spirit, forever adapting, forever evolving. As you drift off, pondering the echoes of this bygone era, remember that history is less about dates and more about the stories we tell, of people who lived, toiled, and dreamed beneath the same sun and stars that watch over us today. Here's to the lessons of the past, guiding us as we navigate our own winding paths through the tapestry of time. In the year 1542, the dusty plains of Rajasthan gave birth to a boy who would redefine what it meant to rule. Akbar, the future emperor, entered the world at the Umayyad fort, a baby with a destiny as big as the empire he would one day command. Picture a scene not of imperial grandeur but of desperation. His father, Humayun, was an emperor without an empire. on the run from Sher Shah Suri, the upstart usurper who had tossed him off his Mughal throne like yesterday's leftovers. But Akbar, he was more than just a kid with a fancy title. Let's set the stage here. Humayun was scrambling across the subcontinent with fewer allies than a porcupine at a balloon party. It was here, in the middle of nowhere, that Akbar made his debut. The irony. He was born in a land that was technically under the control of his family's enemies. You've got to love the dramatic flair of history. Humayun's friend, the local Hindu ruler, Rana Prasad of Amarkot, offered refuge to the displaced emperor. Talk about hospitality. Akbar's childhood was anything but ordinary. Forget about the silver spoon. He was lucky to have a spoon at all. His early years were a whirlwind of constant motion, dodging assassins, and dealing with the kind of family drama that would make a reality TV show blush. At the tender age of 13, while most kids today are trying to figure out algebra, Akbar was thrust onto the Mughal throne. Now, don't let his age fool you. Sure, he was young, but he wasn't just a puppet on the strings of power-hungry regions. The boy emperor had to navigate a minefield of political intrigue that would make the court of any medieval kingdom look like a kindergarten. His ascent to the throne wasn't exactly a smooth ride. It was more of a roller coaster with a few missing bolts. Picture this: a teenager suddenly responsible for an empire stretching across India, with battle-hardened generals and scheming nobles waiting for him to trip up. And then there's that juicy myth about Akbar's illiteracy. It's the kind of story that sticks because it's so tantalizingly ironic. An emperor who couldn't read. But let's set the record straight. While it's true Akbar wasn't a bookworm, he was far from ignorant. He was more of a hands-on learner, a strategic thinker with a knack for surrounding himself with the most brilliant minds of his time. His court became a hub of culture, art, and philosophy, an intellectual salon where ideas could be as sharp as the swords. Akbar wasn't just playing the game, he was rewriting the rules. Speaking of games, young Akbar had a knack for hunting and physical prowess that would put most athletes to shame. It said he could ride a horse like a born cavalryman and wield weapons with the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior. He wasn't just sitting on a throne, he was out there leading from the front. That's leadership, Mughal style. Akbar's early reign was colored by the specter of war, but also by the promise of something greater. He was more than just a figurehead. He was a young man with an empire to consolidate and a vision to realize. In the end, Akbar wasn't just a kid caught in the currents of history. He was the one stirring the waters. The Mughal Empire wasn't going to be just another chapter in history books. Under Akbar's watchful eye, it was poised to become a legend. In a world where power often changed hands faster than a hot potato, Akbar was an anomaly. He didn't just inherit a throne, he earned it, shaped it, and ultimately he would go on to transform it. This was just the beginning. The young emperor was setting the stage for a reign that would leave an indelible mark on the annals of history. It's 1556, and young Akbar, still wet behind the ears from his whirlwind coronation, is about to face a test that would make any seasoned ruler break out in a nervous sweat. The Battle of Panipat, his first major clash, loomed on the horizon like a storm cloud ready to unleash chaos. Now, Panipat was no ordinary battlefield. It was the site where empires rose and fell faster than the latest tick-tock trend. Akbar, all of 14, had to step up to the plate or risk becoming just another footnote in history. Enter Behram Khan, the regent with a name that sounds like he could double as a character in an epic fantasy series. The real-life Behram Khan was a seasoned military commander and political strategist who could outmaneuver his opponents with the finesse of a chess grandmaster. Picture a man who had both the brains and the mustache to match, a real powerhouse. Behram Khan took young Akbar under his wing, not just as a guardian, but as a mentor, guiding him through the treacherous waters of Mughal politics and warfare. The stakes at Panipat were higher than your average high school final exam. Akbar's forces were up against Hemu, a military commander who had proclaimed himself king and was hell-bent on reclaiming Delhi from the Mughals. Hemu was no pushover. He had a reputation for being a ferocious warrior, leading an army of about 30,000. Talk about a tough opponent for a teenager to face. But here's the kicker. Akbar wasn't alone. Behram Khan was the real puppet master behind the scenes, directing the battle with the expertise of a seasoned general. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this legendary showdown. The Mughal army, numbering around 10, 5,000, was outnumbered and outgunned. But what they lacked in numbers, they made up for with strategy. Bahram Khan laid out a plan that would exploit Hemu's weaknesses like a shark sensing blood in the water. He ordered a cavalry charge that hit Hemu's forces with the force of a battering ram, and as fate would have it, a stray arrow struck Hemu in the eye, sending him tumbling from his elephant. Talk about a literal eye-opener for the Mughals. The victory at Panipat wasn't just a win, it was a game-changer. It solidified Akbar's claim to the throne and marked the beginning of his transformation from a boy king into a monarch of legend. But let's not get too carried away by the romanticism of the battle. The truth is, it was less about Akbar's personal heroics and more about the brilliant tactics of Bahram Khan. Our dear Akbar was still learning the ropes, soaking up knowledge like a sponge in a rainstorm. This victory gave Akbar something more valuable than just territory. It gave him credibility. In a world where perception often outweighed reality, being seen as victorious was half the battle won. Suddenly, Akbar wasn't just the kid sitting on the throne. He was the emperor who had triumphed at Panipat. The mythologizing began almost immediately, with stories painting him as a military prodigy. But let's not forget the unsung hero behind the scenes, Bahram Khan, the real architect of victory, who was busy making sure Akbar's reign didn't end before it had truly begun. With Panipat behind him, Akbar's journey to becoming a strategic leader was just getting started. The young emperor was beginning to understand the complexities of ruling an empire that stretched across the Indian subcontinent with its myriad cultures, languages, and political factions. The Mughals were not just conquerors, they were administrators, tasked with managing an empire that was more diverse than an international food festival. Akbar was learning to juggle multiple roles: warrior, diplomat, and visionary. Each victory brought not only new territory, but also new challenges. How do you govern lands with people who might not exactly be thrilled about their new Mughal overlords? Akbar started to grasp the importance of keeping the peace not just with the sword, but also with policies that could win hearts and minds. One of the key lessons from Panipat was the importance of having the right people in your corner. Akbar, young but astute, knew he couldn't do it alone. He began assembling a team of advisors who were as brilliant as they were diverse. This was not just about having yes-men to echo his thoughts, but about gathering the sharpest minds who could challenge him and offer fresh perspectives. And while Akbar was busy transforming into the emperor we'd come to know, Bahram Khan's influence was gradually waning. The regent's power was a double-edged sword, indispensable yet potentially overshadowing. There's a certain irony in preparing someone to lead, only to find that your role is becoming redundant. In 1560, just 4 years after Panipat, Bahram Khan was relieved of his duties, setting off to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, where he was assassinated. His exit marked a turning point for Akbar, who now had to navigate the treacherous waters of governance on his own. Akbar was stepping out of the shadow of his regent, ready to forge his own path. But that's a story for another day. For now, the boy who had emerged victorious at Panipat was poised to become a ruler who would not just lead but redefine what it meant to govern. The curtain was rising on a rule that would blend the idealism of youth with the wisdom of experience, setting the stage for an empire that was anything but ordinary. With Bahram Khan's exit from the stage, Akbar's reign was set to undergo a transformation as dramatic as the plot twist in a summer blockbuster. Now, at the helm without the safety net of a regent, Akbar was ready to unleash his administrative prowess on an empire that was as diverse as it was vast. Forget about resting on his laurels. Akbar was all about action, and his first order of business was to shake up the bureaucratic cobwebs with a series of reforms that would make even the most seasoned administrator take notes. Let's dive right into the Mansabdari system, the crown jewel of Akbar's administrative innovations. Picture this, a system that ranks officials based on their military and civil duties, from the lowly Mansabdar with a rank of 10 to the mighty ones boasting a rank of 5,000. It was like the LinkedIn of the Mughal Empire, except instead of endorsements and connections, you had elephants and soldiers. But here's the kicker. While it sounds like a bureaucratic dream come true, it was also a recipe for chaos. Imagine trying to manage an empire where your officers could, quite literally, weigh in with their armies. The potential for backstabbing and intrigue was as thick as a Tudor family reunion. Now Akbar, ever the shrewd strategist, knew that keeping his officials happy was key to maintaining control. So, he tied their salaries to the number of soldiers they commanded. But the numbers game wasn't just about lining pockets. It was about loyalty. Ensuring that these Mansabdars were financially invested in the empire, Akbar ensured they were less likely to jump ship at the first sign of trouble. It was a classic case of keep your friends close, and your well-armed subordinates closer. But let's not paint too rosy a picture here. The Mansabdari system, while genius on paper, had its fair share of kinks. The constant shuffling of ranks created a bureaucratic musical chairs that made stability a rare commodity. And then there was the little issue of Mansabdars, inflating their troop numbers to pocket extra cash. A fiscal nightmare that would make any accountant break into a sweat. It's a testament to Akbar's diplomatic finesse that he managed to keep this house of cards from collapsing entirely. While Akbar was busy juggling the egos and ambitions of his officers, he didn't forget about the backbone of his empire, the common people. Enter the tax reforms, a masterstroke that demonstrated his economic acumen. Akbar shifted the tax system to be based on a crop-sharing model, where peasants paid a fixed portion of their harvest to the state. This change wasn't just about filling the imperial coffers, it was about fairness. By tying taxes to agricultural output, Akbar ensured that farmers weren't squeezed dry during bad harvests. It was an economic lifeline thrown to the agrarian backbone of his empire, making the peasants less likely to revolt and more likely to thrive. But like every good story, there's a twist. This model, while revolutionary, wasn't exactly foolproof. The challenge was in determining the fair share, a task left to local revenue officials who weren't always the paragons of virtue. The potential for exploitation was as real as the monsoon rains, and corruption was the dark cloud that occasionally rained on Akbar's parade of reforms. Yet, the system's brilliance lay in its adaptability, allowing Akbar to continually tweak it like a maestro fine-tuning an orchestra. Then there's the matter of Akbar's religious policies, another realm where his genius shone through like a lighthouse in a storm. In an era where religious intolerance was the norm, Akbar's approach was as refreshing as a cool breeze on a hot day. He abolished the jizya, a tax on non-Muslims, a move that was as politically savvy as it was progressive. This wasn't just about being the nice guy. It was about unifying his diverse empire under a banner of inclusivity. Akbar understood that loyalty born of respect was far sturdier than that born of fear. And now, let's talk about that infamous divine faith, or Din-i-Ilahi. Here's where the myth-making machine really kicks into overdrive. The romanticized notion is that Akbar, in a bid to bring about religious harmony, concocted a new faith blending elements of various religions, like a historical smoothie. But let's get real for a second. Din-i-Ilahi was less a religion and more a personal cult of personality, a philosophical club for Akbar's inner circle. It never caught on beyond the court, precisely because it wasn't designed to. The real genius of Din-i-Ilahi lay in its symbolism. It wasn't about conversion, it was about conversation. By promoting discussions among various religious leaders, Akbar fostered an atmosphere of intellectual curiosity and mutual respect. It was less about building a new faith and more about building bridges, a strategy that paid off in spades as it helped quell potential uprisings and fostered a sense of unity among his subjects. The romantic appeal of Akbar as a unifier of religions is compelling, but the reality is far more nuanced and, dare I say, even more impressive. Akbar's reign was a masterclass in balancing ideals with practicality. His administrative reforms, while not without their flaws, laid the groundwork for a stable and prosperous empire. His tax policies and religious tolerance were not just acts of benevolence, but calculated moves to secure his rule. Akbar was not just a dreamer, he was a doer, a man who understood that the true art of governance lay in the details. As we delve deeper into his reign, it's clear that Akbar's story is one of constant evolution. He was a ruler who refused to be shackled by tradition, a leader unafraid to rewrite the rules in pursuit of a greater vision. The young emperor who had emerged from the shadow of his regent was now casting his own, and it stretched far beyond the borders of his empire. But as with any great tale, there's plenty more to uncover, and the next chapter promises even more intrigue and innovation. Stay tuned, because the story of Akbar is far from over. And now, As the curtain lifts on the next act of Akbar's saga, we find ourselves in the heart of his court, a place as much about power plays as it was about intellectual pursuits. Akbar wasn't just ruling an empire, he was hosting the historical equivalent of a TED talk marathon. His court at Fireplace was a cultural melting pot, an intellectual bazaar where the brightest minds of the era gathered to debate everything from philosophy to poetry. Picture a scene that was part Renaissance fair, part political summit, with a dash of academic symposium thrown in for good measure. Speaking of Fireplace, let's take a stroll through this architectural marvel. Built between 1571 and 1585, this city was Akbar's love letter to grandeur and innovation. It wasn't just a seat of power, it was a statement piece, an empire-wide press release in stone and mortar. With its red sandstone buildings, Fireplace was less a city and more an elaborate stage set, complete with palaces, masks, and even a sprawling audience chamber. Akbar's vision was as audacious as it was expansive, a testament to his belief in the transformative power of architecture and urban planning. But let's not get swept away by the romanticism of it all. Sure, Fireplace was breathtaking, but it was also a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. Situated on a ridge, the city faced chronic water shortages that would make a hydrologist weep. The lack of a reliable water supply was a glaring oversight, akin to building a luxury yacht without a rudder. Imagine trying to maintain an entire city where the most basic necessity was as scarce as a snowflake in the desert. Akbar's solution, a system of reservoirs and wells, which, while ingenious, was about as reliable as a paper umbrella in a thunderstorm. The financial burden of maintaining such opulence was staggering. We're talking about an expenditure that could rival the GDP of small countries. Akbar's court was a well-oiled machine of splendor that required constant feeding. Picture this: hundreds of artists, artisans, scholars, and courtiers, all of whom needed to be housed, fed, and of course paid. It's said that Fireplace's construction alone cost millions of rupees, a sum that would make any modern-day accountant reach for the smelling salts. Yet, for all its financial and logistical challenges, Fireplace was a cultural beacon. It was here that Akbar engaged in his famous debates with scholars of different faiths, a sort of theological WrestleMania where ideas clashed and sparred. Akbar, ever the curious monarch, would preside over these discussions, posing questions that challenged the very foundations of religious dogma. It was less about finding definitive answers and more about the pursuit of knowledge, an intellectual free-for-all that would have made Socrates proud. Now, about those debates, let's talk about their real purpose. Sure, they were about fostering understanding, but they were also a masterclass in public relations. By inviting scholars from across the religious spectrum, Akbar was sending a message loud and clear. The Mughal Empire was a place where diversity was not just tolerated, but celebrated. It was a savvy move that helped solidify his image as a ruler who was both enlightened and inclusive. Behind the intellectual discourse was an emperor who understood the power of perception and used it to strengthen his grip on power. The grandiosity of Akbar's court was matched only by the pageantry of his public relations campaigns. In an era long before social media, Akbar's court was a spectacle designed to impress and dazzle. His public audiences, or darbars, were legendary, with the emperor himself at the center, dispensing justice and wisdom with the flair of a seasoned performer. It was all about optics, a carefully curated display of power and benevolence that kept the empire's subjects both in awe and in line. But beneath the glittering surface of court life lay the gritty realities of empire management. Akbar's reign was a constant balancing act between fiscal prudence and cultural patronage. The cost of patronizing artists and philosophers was substantial, and the empire's coffers were not bottomless. Akbar had to ensure that his cultural investments didn't come at the expense of military and administrative efficiency. It was a tightrope walk worthy of the finest acrobat, requiring both vision and restraint. Speaking of restraint, let's not forget Akbar's personal life, a topic as intricate as the finest Mughal tapestry. The emperor had a harem that was more of a small village, with hundreds of wives and concubines, each with their own political alliances and ambitions. Managing such a dynamic was no small feat. Akbar had to be not just a ruler, but a diplomat, ensuring that the various factions within his household didn't erupt into open conflict. It was a domestic chess game, where every move had to be calculated and precise. Yet, for all the myths of indulgence, Akbar's personal life was surprisingly disciplined. He was known to rise early, dedicating hours to both statecraft and self-improvement. This wasn't a ruler content to rest on his laurels. He was constantly seeking knowledge, whether it was in the form of religious texts or scientific treatises. His court was not just a center of power, but a hub of learning, where the exchange of ideas was as valuable as the exchange of gold. As we delve deeper into the tapestry of Akbar's reign, it becomes clear that his story is one of contradictions. A ruler both generous and pragmatic, a visionary both idealistic and calculating. His court was a microcosm of the empire he governed, diverse, complex, and utterly fascinating. Akbar's legacy is not just one of conquest or construction, but of an intellectual curiosity that transcended borders and beliefs. And while the tales of his courtly splendor are captivating, the realities of maintaining such an empire were anything but simple. Akbar was a man who understood that the true art of leadership lay in the ability to harmonize grandeur with practicality, and in this balance he found the key to his enduring legacy. But hold onto your turbans, because there's more to unfold in the next chapter of Akbar's monumental journey. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of his impact on the Mughal Empire, a tale that continues to unfurl with each passing year of his reign. The emperor who built Faidehpur Sikri and engaged in debates that shaped his era is far from finished, and the saga promises even more intrigue, innovation, and yes, a few surprises along the way. Stay tuned, because the story of Akbar is far from reaching its final act. So, as the dust of history settles, let's take a step back and look at what Akbar truly left behind. Spoiler alert, it's not all Bollywood glitz and glory. The legacy of the great Mughal is a cocktail of reform, mythology, and a few inconvenient truths that make for a fascinating after-party discussion. First, let's pop the hood on his administrative reforms. Akbar's innovative tax policies and the Mansabdari system laid the groundwork for an empire that could actually run without falling apart at the seams. His decision to base taxes on crop yields rather than fixed sums. Genius. It meant that during a bad harvest, farmers weren't left selling their children to pay their dues. But you know, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. The bureaucratic beast he created was as prone to corruption as a medieval Ponzi scheme. The same officials who were supposed to help often ended up lining their own pockets. Akbar's system was a grand experiment in governance, and while it didn't always work perfectly, it showed his knack for turning the empire's weaknesses into strengths. Now, fast forward to Akbar's successors. Here's the kicker. They rode the waves he created, but didn't always steer with the same finesse. Jahangir, his son, inherited the throne and a playbook of policies that kept the empire ticking. But while Jahangir had his father's taste for luxury, he lacked his strategic discipline. He was more likely to be found in a garden with a glass of wine than in a council chamber. Sure, he kept the machine running, but he wasn't exactly pushing the boundaries like dear old dad. Then came Shah Jahan, the emperor with a penchant for grandiose architecture. Remember the Taj Mahal? Yeah, that was him, but it was built on the back of an empire straining under the weight of extravagance. Akbar's legacy of innovation took a backseat to opulence, and the empire's coffers felt the pinch. By the time Aurangzeb rolled around, the empire was a bloated leviathan, struggling to maintain its grip. Aurangzeb's reign, marked by religious intolerance and military overreach, was a far cry from Akbar's inclusive policies. It's as if they took the manual on Akbar's enlightened rule and used it as a doorstop. But let's not heap all the blame on his successors. Akbar's legacy is partly responsible for shaping the India we know today. His policies of religious tolerance, albeit practical at heart, laid the foundation for a more integrated subcontinent. The idea that you could have a diverse empire where everyone didn't have to walk on eggshells around each other was revolutionary. And while the Mughal Empire eventually crumbled under its own weight, the echoes of Akbar's reign can still be heard in India's social fabric. Now, onto the myths and the magic. The romanticized image of Akbar is about as accurate as a 16th century map. Sure, he was a visionary, but he was also a ruler who needed to keep a lid on dissent. The grandeur of his court was as much about projecting power as it was about cultural enrichment. The real Akbar had to make tough calls, sometimes sacrificing ideals on the altar of necessity. If his reign were a movie, there'd be plenty of scenes left on the cutting room floor, ones that didn't fit the narrative of the benevolent monarch. In modern media, Akbar often shows up dressed in the robes of a wise and just ruler, the kind who'd be handing out sage advice on a talk show. But the truth is, his reign was a balancing act, walking the tightrope between innovation and tradition. His story endures not just because of the grand achievements, but because it's a reminder that even the greatest leaders are only human. They're a blend of the visionary and the pragmatic, the idealist and the realist. So, what's the takeaway from Akbar's saga? It's that leadership is complex, messy, and often contradictory. Akbar's ability to adapt, to recognize the cultural and religious diversity of his realm as an asset rather than a liability, set him apart. It's the story of a ruler who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to experiment, and to embrace change. It's a tale that resonates because it's as relevant today as it was 5 centuries ago. As we wrap up our journey through Akbar's life, let's remember him not just as a figure of legend, but as a man who redefined what it meant to rule. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but his reign was a masterclass in leadership that continues to offer lessons to this day. In a world where empires rise and fall, Akbar's story remains a testament to the power of vision, courage, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. And with that, dear listener, we close the book on one of history's most fascinating chapters. Here's to the great mogul. May his legacy continue to inspire. The year was 626 BCE, and Babylon was about to get its groove back, thanks to a guy named Nabopolassar, who wasn't just any rebel with a cause. No, he was a rebel with a whole empire's worth of ambition. You see, the Assyrians had been the big dogs of the ancient Near Eastern bloc for a while. So long, in fact, that their grip on power was starting to loosen. Think of them as that aging rock band that just refused to retire. They still had some hits left in them, but the encore was starting to sound a bit tired. Nabopolassar saw an opportunity in this waning Assyrian power, and like any good opportunist, he seized it. The Assyrians were overextended, their resources spread thinner than the last bit of butter on toast. They were juggling a multi-ethnic empire with all the grace of a cat on a hot tin roof. Enter Nabopolassar, who was about to turn Babylon into the hardest new act in town. He kicked things off with a rebellion, which, in ancient Mesopotamian terms, was basically the equivalent of dropping a surprise album. You don't know it's coming, but once it hits, everyone's talking about it. Now, you might wonder how a guy like Nabopolassar pulled off such a feat. It wasn't just about having the right ideas, it was also about having the right friends. Nabopolassar knew that taking down the Assyrian Empire wasn't a solo project, required a coalition of the willing, or in this case, the disgruntled. Enter the Medes, another group that had had enough of Assyrian dominance. By forming an alliance with the Medes, Nabopolassar was essentially saying, "Hey, your enemy is my enemy, so let's make some history." Their strategic bromance was sealed with an alliance that was as much about survival as it was about power. The Medes brought military might to the table, while Nabopolassar offered the promise of a new order, one where the Assyrians weren't calling the shots. It was a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, with a side of, let's see how far we can take this. But it wasn't just military alliances that Nabopolassar was banking on. The Neo-Babylonian Empire's ascent was also fueled by some savvy economic moves. The region was a crossroads of trade, a veritable Silk Road of the ancient world. Babylon sat at the heart of this network, and Nabopolassar knew that controlling trade routes meant controlling wealth. He was like the Jeff Bezos of his day, except with less emphasis on 2-day shipping and more on camel caravans. Let's talk numbers for a minute. Babylon's location along the Euphrates River meant it was ideally positioned to control trade between the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. This wasn't just about moving goods, it was about moving money. Grain, textiles, spices, you name it, Babylon had a hand in it. By capitalizing on these trade routes, Nabopolassar ensured a steady flow of wealth into his burgeoning empire. And we all know that in politics, as in life, money talks. Of course, no empire is built on alliances and trade alone. Nabopolassar had to play a bit of political chess to keep his new empire from collapsing under its own weight. The Assyrians had left a power vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it's filled with potential chaos. Nabopolassar's solution was a centralized administration that could hold things together while he worked on expanding his influence. He and his successors, including the famous Nebuchadnezzar Roman II, were about more than just empire building. They were about empire maintaining, which is an art in itself. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of spinning plates, except the plates are provinces, and the stakes are a lot higher than just a mess on the floor. And let's not forget the PR game. Nabopolassar and his descendants knew that to rule effectively, they needed to rule the narrative. Babylon was not just a city, it was a symbol. The empire's propaganda machine worked overtime to portray Babylon as the center of the universe, a place so splendid that even the guards would want a piece of real estate there. It was the ultimate rebranding effort, turning a city into the beating heart of an empire. The Neo-Babylonian Empire's rise was as much about perception as it was about power. Even as they built their empire brick by brick, they were also building a legacy, crafting a story that would echo through the ages. And like any good story, it was filled with triumphs, alliances, and a fair bit of drama. Nabopolassar's rebellion was just the opening act in a saga that would see Babylon become the jewel of the ancient world. The rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was a masterclass in strategy, economics, and a bit of good old-fashioned luck. A reminder that sometimes you've just got to know when to make your move and who to make it with. The stage was set for Nebuchadnezzar Roman II, the man who would take Babylon's burgeoning reputation and crank it up to 11. If Nabopolassar was the savvy entrepreneur who laid the groundwork, Nebuchadnezzar was the rockstar son who catapulted the family business into the stratosphere. His empire wasn't just about military might, it was a cultural tour de force. We're talking the architectural equivalent of a blockbuster franchise, with Babylon as the main attraction. Let's start with the Hanging Gardens, the ancient world's answer to, how can we make this city even more extra? According to poetic lore, they were a terraced paradise constructed to remind Nebuchadnezzar's wife, Amedes, of her lush homeland. Picture this, tiered gardens, each a mini-Eden teeming with exotic flora, watered by an engineering feat that would make even modern-day hydrologists raise an eyebrow. These gardens were supposedly visible from miles away, a testament to the empire's wealth and ambition. But hold your horses, green thumbs. The real kicker, there's a good chance the Hanging Gardens never existed in Babylon at all. Yeah, it's like finding out your favorite childhood story was just a clever bit of marketing. Ancient historians like Strabo and Philo give us these tantalizing descriptions, but the evidence is as elusive as a mirage in a desert. Some scholars suggest the gardens might have actually been in Nineveh, part of Assyria's last hurrah. Talk about a plot twist worthy of a soap opera. Yet, the legend persists, a testament to the power of narrative over hard facts. Babylon, like a master illusionist, knew how to keep people talking. Now, let's pivot to something we can actually put our historical fingers on, the Ishtar Gate. This wasn't just an entrance, it was a declaration. Made from glazed bricks, it shimmered in shades of blue and gold, featuring images of dragons and bulls that would make any would-be invader think twice. Built around 575 BCE, the gate was part of a grand processional way that stretched over half a mile, a corridor of splendor leading to the temple of Marduk. If the Ishtar Gate had a modern equivalent, it would be the red carpet at the Oscars. Except this one was designed to dazzle guards as much as mortals. The gate itself was a feat of construction, requiring meticulous craftsmanship, and let's face it, a budget that would make even the most extravagant modern city planners blush. We're talking about thousands of bricks, each painstakingly fired and glazed. This wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a statement of economic muscle. Babylon was saying, we've got the resources and the artistry to pull this off. And when you've got that kind of swagger, people tend to give you a wide berth. But Nebuchadnezzar's ambitions weren't confined to bricks and mortar. He wanted Babylon to be the cultural epicenter, a beacon of knowledge and learning. The city became a melting pot of ideas, attracting scholars, artists, and scribes like moths to a flame. Libraries brimmed with cuneiform tablets, covering everything from astronomy to mathematics. Babylon was the place to be if you had a curious mind and a love for clay tablets. However, beneath this cultural renaissance lay the gritty reality of empire building. Nebuchadnezzar's projects, grand as they were, didn't come cheap. They required a workforce that was sourced through less than glamorous means. Conquered peoples were often put to work, a sobering reminder that the splendor of Babylon was built on the backs of many who had little say in the matter. It's a classic case of history's dual nature. The awe-inspiring achievements often have a shadow side. Economically, Babylon was a juggernaut, with trade routes humming like a well-oiled machine. The city was a hub for commerce, dealing in everything from textiles to spices. Silver was the currency of choice, and Babylon's coffers were filled to the brim. The wealth allowed for more than just grand architectural statements. It fueled a lifestyle that was, by ancient standards, the height of luxury. Yet, with great wealth came great expectations. The need to maintain such opulence meant constant vigilance over trade routes and the never-ending quest for new resources. Nebuchadnezzar's reign saw the empire reach its zenith, but like any good story, there were clouds on the horizon. The empire's splendor was a double-edged sword. It attracted admiration, but also envy. Babylon was a jewel, but one that had to be fiercely protected. Nebuchadnezzar knew that while walls and gates could defend a city, it was the people within who truly determined its fate. In the end, Neo-Babylonian Empire was a tapestry woven with threads of legend and reality, a blend of myth and mortar. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was a marvel, a city that dared to dream big and, for a time, succeeded beyond measure. It was a place where human ambition reached for the heavens, and for a brief, shining moment, touched the stars. But as history would soon show, even the brightest stars can flicker and fade, leaving behind stories that are retold, reimagined, and sometimes just plain embellished. And that's the magic of history, isn't it? It's a saga that continues to unfold, with each chapter offering new revelations, and of course, new questions. So stay tuned, because Babylon's tale is far from over. And just like that, we're thrust into the heart of Babylonian society, a bustling hive where the social structure was as layered as one of their beloved ziggurats. Let's start with the priests, those ancient influencers who were more than just spiritual guides. These guys wielded power that would make even a modern-day CEO blush. Positioned at the top of the social ladder, priests were the gatekeepers of divine favor and earthly resources. They managed temple estates, oversaw vast tracts of agricultural land, and held sway over the local economy. It was a classic case of divine right meeting economic might. In fact, priests could be seen as the original multitaskers. When they weren't busy conducting rituals, they were moonlighting as accountants and estate managers. Temples were the banks of ancient Babylon, and priests were the tellers, safeguarding wealth and ensuring the guards were appeased with the finest offerings. Picture a religious institution doubling as Wall Street, but with more incense and fewer investment bankers. And while their devotion might seem quaint today, it was serious business back then. The guards were as much about economics as they were about spirituality, a divine merger of faith and finance. Now, let's pivot to the merchants, the middle-class go-getters of Babylon who kept the economy buzzing. These were the folks who knew the value of a good trade route and could haggle with the best of them. Merchants were the connectors, the ones who bridged the gaps between different cultures and economies. They dealt in everything from textiles to metals, their ships and caravans crisscrossing the ancient world like a web spun out of ambition and profit margins. And though we might romanticize their wanderlust today, make no mistake, this was a cutthroat business. Competition was fierce, and only the shrewdest survived. The legal code that governed these transactions was as complex as it was comprehensive. Hammurabi's code might not have been in full swing during the Neo-Babylonian era, but its spirit lingered in the laws that dictated everything from property rights to business disputes. These laws were the ancient equivalent of the fine print, ensuring that everyone knew where they stood and what they owed. Take, for example, the law that mandated a merchant to repay double if he falsely accused another of theft. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. And then, in the shadows of this bustling society, we find the slaves, the backbone of Babylon's labor force. While we might balk at the notion today, slavery was an accepted part of the ancient world. Slaves were often prisoners of war or people who had fallen into debt, and their lives were a far cry from the luxury enjoyed by their masters. They toiled in fields, built monumental structures, and served in households, their existence a sobering reminder of the human cost behind Babylon's grandeur. But here's where it gets interesting. Babylonian slaves had certain rights. They could own property, conduct business, and even buy their freedom if they managed to scrape together enough wealth. So, while their lives were undeniably harsh, there was a glimmer of hope, a pathway to a better life that was, for some, more than just a pipe dream. Imagine the grit it took to navigate such a system, to turn the tables in a world that seemed stacked against you. Now, a quick detour into the realm of Babylonian laws, which were sometimes as bizarre as they were practical. For instance, if a man accused his wife of infidelity without proof, he risked being dunked in the river. If he floated, he was guilty. If he sank, well, the guards would sort it out. It's like an ancient episode of Judge Judy, but with a watery twist. These laws were designed to maintain order, but they also reveal a society grappling with issues of trust and justice in a world where divine intervention was the ultimate arbiter. Speaking of divine intervention, let's not forget the role of women in Babylonian society. While they weren't exactly leading the charge, women could own property, run businesses, and even serve as priestesses. They had legal rights that might surprise us today, given the often male-dominated narrative of ancient history. Sure, they faced their share of challenges, but in Babylon, women had a degree of agency that was, in some ways, ahead of its time. It was a society where, despite the odds, women could carve out niches for themselves, defying the expectations of an era. But for all its complexity, Babylonian society was not immune to the quirks of bureaucracy. The Babylonians were meticulous record keepers, documenting everything from grain harvests to trade agreements on clay tablets. Imagine the ancient version of spreadsheets, except these couldn't be deleted with a simple keystroke. Instead, they were etched into clay, baked, and stored for posterity, a bureaucrat's dream and an archivist's nightmare. This fixation on record-keeping was both a blessing and a curse, offering insights into their daily lives while bogging down the system in a mire of administrative detail. In the end, navigating Babylonian society was like tiptoeing through a labyrinth of social norms, legal codes, and economic imperatives. It was a world where ambition and pragmatism danced a delicate tango, where the pursuit of wealth and power was tempered by the ever-present gaze of the guards. And while we might chuckle at their quirks from the safe distance of history, it's worth remembering that these ancient Babylonians were grappling with the same big questions we face today. How do we balance power with responsibility? How do we ensure justice in an imperfect world? And perhaps most importantly, how do we make our mark in a universe that seems, at times, as chaotic as it is wondrous? As we leave behind the buzzing streets and towering ziggurats of Babylon, it's clear that the city's story is far more than the sum of its parts. It's a tale of ambition and resilience, of a society striving to elevate itself even as it wrestled with its own complexities. And while the Neo-Babylonian Empire's star may have eventually waned, its legacy continues to echo through the corridors of history, a reminder that even in the ancient world, humanity's reach often exceeded its grasp. So, stay tuned, because the next chapters in Babylon's saga promise to be just as enthralling, and perhaps even more revealing. If Babylon's rise was a symphony of ambition and grandeur, its decline was more of a dissonant jazz piece, unpredictable and full of unexpected turns. As we wade into the Empire's twilight, it becomes clear that what goes up must inevitably come crashing down, sometimes with the grace of a toppled ziggurat. Cue the internal strife, and those pesky Persians who were about to give Babylon a masterclass in hostile takeovers. The Empire's decline began with a series of political blunders that would make even the most seasoned politicians cringe. After Nebuchadnezzar Roman II reign, the throne was a veritable game of musical chairs, with rulers coming and going faster than you could say administrative chaos. Take Emil Marduk, for instance, Nebuchadnezzar's son. His rule was so brief. It's like he barely had time to sit in the royal chair before being assassinated by his brother-in-law, Neriglissar. Talk about family drama. But the real kicker came with Nabonidus, a king who had all the makings of a historical scapegoat. Nabonidus took the throne in 556 BCE and quickly made himself about as popular as a sandstorm at a garden party. Instead of sticking around Babylon, he decided to spend a decade in the Arabian desert, leaving the empire in the hands of his son, Belshazzar. It's like you read a handbook on absentee leadership and thought, why not? His religious reforms didn't win him any fans either. He tried to elevate the moon god's sin over the traditional Babylonian gods. Picture a modern CEO trying to replace coffee with kale smoothies in the break room. It's not going to win you any popularity contests. Meanwhile, the Persians, led by Cyrus the Great, were watching Babylon's missteps with the kind of interest you reserve for a slow-motion car crash. Cyrus was no ordinary conqueror. He was a visionary with a knack for turning adversaries into allies. By 539 BCE, the writing was on the wall, literally, if you know your biblical tales. Babylon's infamous fall is often shrouded in legend, with tales of river diversions and a bloodless takeover. The truth, less cinematic, but equally compelling. Cyrus capitalized on Babylon's internal divisions and the general discontent among its people. The Babylonian army was stretched thinner than a toga at a college party, and its morale was about as high as a snake's belly. The decisive Battle of Opis was less of a battle and more of a foregone conclusion. The Persian army swept through with minimal resistance, and Babylon fell without much of a fight. Nabonidus was captured, and Cyrus entered Babylon like a conquering hero, promising to restore order and respect the local customs. Who knew that good PR could be so effective? But why did Babylon crumble so easily? The answer lies in a mix of economic downturns and strategic blunders. The economy, once a roaring river of trade and wealth, had begun to dry up. Over-reliance on forced labor and the constant need for resources to fund grandiose projects took their toll. Babylon's wealth had become its Achilles heel, making it a target for anyone with an eye for conquest and a plan to execute it. The empire was also a victim of its own success. With such a diverse population, keeping everyone happy was like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. Impressive if you can pull it off, disastrous if you can't. Nabonidus's religious reforms only widened the rift between the ruling class and the priestly elite, creating a chasm that Cyrus was all too eager to exploit. And let's not forget the role of trade routes. Babylon's prosperity was built on controlling these ancient highways, but as new powers emerged, those routes became battlegrounds. The Persians were experts at securing and maintaining these vital lifelines, understanding that controlling trade was as important as controlling armies. Economically, the empire was running on fumes. Inflation was on the rise, and the silver that once filled Babylon's coffers was now trickling away like sand through a sieve. The grand projects of Nebuchadnezzar's era had left a legacy of debt, and the empire's finances were about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. In the end, Babylon's fall wasn't just a military defeat, it was an economic and political unraveling. The empire's grandeur had masked the underlying fragility, and when the Persians came knocking, the facade crumbled. Cyrus's takeover was swift and efficient, a testament to his strategic genius and Babylon's unfortunate decline. As the dust settled, Babylon became part of the Persian Empire, a transition that was smoother than one might expect. Cyrus was astute enough to recognize the benefits of Babylonian culture and administration, integrating them into his vast empire. It was a testament to his leadership that Babylon continued to thrive as a major center of commerce and culture, even under new management. In the grand tapestry of history, Babylon's decline is a poignant reminder of the perils of overreach and the importance of adaptability. It's a story that echoes through the ages, reminding us that even the mightiest empires are not immune to the forces of change. As we prepare to delve into the final act of Babylon's saga, it's clear that this ancient city, with its glorious past and tumultuous end, still has lessons to impart. So, stick around. There's more to uncover as we explore the legacy and aftermath of Babylon's storied existence. As the curtain falls on Babylon's tumultuous saga, we're left with a legacy that's as multi-layered as a Babylonian ziggurat and almost as dizzying to unravel. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, despite its relatively short stint in the limelight from 626 to 539 BCE, left an indelible mark on history, a bit like a rock star who had a brief but explosive career. Its cultural contributions and cautionary tales ripple through time, influencing everything from language to architecture, and even our understanding of what makes an empire tick. First off, let's talk culture. Babylon wasn't just a city of bricks and mortar, it was a crucible of innovation. The Babylonians were the original math geeks, contributing to the development of the sexagesimal system, the very reason we divide time into 60 minutes and 60 seconds. So the next time you're hurrying through a minute, thank the Babylonians for their fascination with the number 60. Their advances in astronomy were equally groundbreaking. They were charting the stars long before it was cool, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the science of astronomy. Their detailed star charts and lunar calendars were the ancient equivalent of an iPhone calendar app, minus the notifications. And then there's the architecture. The Ishtar Gate and the ziggurats weren't just structures, they were statements. They screamed power, wealth, and a touch of, look what we can do. These architectural marvels didn't just awe the ancients, they inspired later civilizations. The Greeks and Romans borrowed heavily from Babylonian aesthetics, proving that good design is truly timeless. Even today, echoes of Babylonian architecture can be seen in the grandiose facades of modern buildings. But let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. The harsh reality of Babylon's legacy is equally instructive. Economically, the empire was a cautionary tale in overreach. Sure, controlling trade routes was a savvy move, but it also made Babylon a juicy target for conquest. Wealth is a double-edged sword. It can build an empire or make it a sitting duck. The reliance on forced labor and the constant quest for resources left an economic strain that was as visible as the cracks in a poorly maintained ziggurat. Politically and socially, Babylon's story is a masterclass in the pitfalls of leadership. The empire's downfall was a direct result of internal discord and poor decision-making. Rulers like Nabonidus demonstrated that being out of touch, literally, in his case, can have catastrophic consequences. His religious reforms were the ancient equivalent of changing the company's mission statement without consulting the employees, a blunder that created fissures for enemies to exploit. Now, let's get into some myth-busting, because what's history without a little debunking? Take the Hanging Gardens, for instance. We've already touched on their elusive existence, but let's dig a bit deeper. The allure of the gardens is undeniable, a lush, terraced paradise in the desert. But the historical record is about as solid as a sandcastle at high tide. Archaeologists have yet to find definitive evidence of their existence in Babylon, leading some to speculate that they were actually in Nineveh. It's a tale that captures the imagination, proving that sometimes stories are more resilient than facts. And what about the infamous Tower of Babel? This biblical icon has long been associated with Babylon, symbolizing human hubris and divine retribution. While there was indeed a massive ziggurat in Babylon, known as Eremenenki, the Tower of Babel, as described in religious texts, is more allegory than architecture. It's a reminder that legends often carry kernels of truth wrapped in layers of narrative embellishment. So why does the story of Babylon still captivate us today? It's the quintessential tale of rise and fall, ambition and hubris. Babylon embodies the eternal human struggle between reaching for greatness and facing the consequences of overreach. It's a narrative that resonates through time, echoing in the halls of power and whispered in the annals of history. Babylon's legacy also serves as a mirror, reflecting our own societal challenges. The empire's blend of cultural diversity and political complexity is as relevant today as it was millennia ago. In a world where globalization and cultural exchange are at the forefront, Babylon's experience offers valuable lessons in balance and adaptability. And let's not forget the sheer drama of it all. The Neo-Babylonian Empire was a stage where larger-than-life characters played out epic sagas of power, betrayal, and redemption. It's like an ancient soap opera, with plot twists and cliffhangers that keep us coming back for more. But unlike a TV show, the stakes were real, the outcomes irreversible. As we wrap up our journey through Babylon's storied past, let's take a moment to appreciate the empire's enduring impact. It's a testament to human ingenuity and folly, a reminder that even in the face of ruin, the echoes of greatness can inspire future generations. Babylon's tale is far from a dusty relic of the past. It's a living narrative that continues to unfold, challenging us to learn from its triumphs and mistakes. In the end, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was more than just a chapter in a history book. It was a beacon of human achievement and a cautionary tale of ambition unchecked. Its story is a testament to the complexity of civilization and the fragility of power, a narrative that calls out to us across the millennia, urging us to listen, learn, and perhaps do a little better. So as we close the book on this ancient powerhouse, let's carry forward the lessons of Babylon, for in its ruins lie the seeds of wisdom and the promise of tomorrow. The life of Queen Elizabeth Roman II began on a note that was about as unexpected as finding a corgi in your bathtub. Born on April 21, 1926, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor entered the world as the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. At the time, her chances of ascending to the throne were about as likely as a snowball surviving in a barn fire. Her uncle, Edward Roman VIII, was the heir apparent, and her dad was comfortably positioned as the spare. But in the grand tradition of British drama, sometimes life throws a curveball harder than any cricket bowler. Fast forward to 1936, and the Game of Thrones took a sharp left turn. King Edward Roman VIII, in a move that could only be described as scandalously romantic or romantically scandalous, abdicated the throne to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. Suddenly, Elizabeth's dad was King George VI, and the young princess was thrust from the sidelines into the spotlight faster than you can say royal duty. By the age of 10, she was heir presumptive, her life trajectory altered by love, duty, and a bit of constitutional crisis. Despite the regal upheaval, Elizabeth's childhood wasn't all tiaras and tea ceremonies. In fact, some of her early years were charmingly relatable. Take, for instance, her first corgi, a little fluffball named Dookie. Gifted to her in 1933, Dookie was the beginning of Elizabeth's lifelong love affair with the breed. And if you've ever watched a corgi run, you know they're as much about comedy as they are about companionship. Her fondness for these short-legged pups was no mere royal whimsy. It was a full-blown passion that would see her owning more than 30 corgis over her lifetime. Talk about puppy love. But it wasn't all corgis and crumpets. When World War Roman II broke out, the royal family was determined to lead by example. While many expected them to flee to Canada, they stayed put, refusing to abandon the ship. Elizabeth and her sister, Margaret, were evacuated to Windsor Castle, away from the Blitzkrieg's reach, but not from the war's impact. As the war raged on, young Elizabeth was not content to sit idly by. In 1945, at the age of 18, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army, where she trained as a mechanic and driver. Imagine that, a future queen, sleeves rolled up, covered in engine grease. Not just a figurehead, but a hands-on participant in the war effort. This experience was more than a royal PR move. It was a reflection of a post-war Britain that was rebuilding itself from the ground up. A country that had endured the Blitz, rationing, and lost needed symbols of resilience and renewal. Elizabeth, with her hands-on wartime service, became exactly that. She embodied both tradition and modernity, a young woman stepping into roles previously unimagined for someone of her standing. As Britain emerged from the shadows of war, the socio-political landscape was undergoing seismic shifts. The Labour Party, under Clement Attlee, won a landslide victory in the 1945 general election. The nation was ready for change, hungry for social reform and better living standards. The National Health Service was born, promising healthcare for all, a revolutionary concept at the time. Nationalization of key industries was underway, and the welfare state was taking shape. This was a Britain that was redefining itself, shedding the vestiges of its imperial past while grappling with the realities of a diminished global role. Against this backdrop, Elizabeth represented a new kind of monarchy, one that was less about colonial grandeur and more about continuity and stability. She was a symbol of a nation that could adapt and endure, an embodiment of the British stiff upper lip, with a touch more warmth and a lot more corgis. Her path to the throne was paved not just by the abdication crisis, but by the very fabric of a nation in transition. As 1952 approached, Elizabeth wasn't just preparing to become a queen. She was about to become the linchpin in a rapidly evolving society. Her reign would not be just a succession to the throne, but a testament to the power of adaptability and resilience in an ever-changing world. The story of Elizabeth's early years is one of unexpected turns and steadfast determination, of how a young princess became not just the longest reigning monarch in British history, but a symbol of enduring stability. It's a tale that combines the charm of corgis with the grit of a wartime mechanic, set against the backdrop of a Britain finding its footing in a new world order. And it's only just the beginning of a reign that would witness incredible transformations and remarkable endurance. If you think Elizabeth's journey to the throne was a wild ride, just wait until you hear about her coronation. Fast forward to June 2, 1953, a day as iconic as it was extravagant, with all the pomp and circumstance you could fit into one 27-inch black and white television screen. Yes, you heard right. The coronation was the first royal event to be televised, bringing the majesty of Westminster Abbey into the living rooms of more than 20 million Britons. Talk about a game-changer in royal PR. But let's pause for a moment and talk numbers, because, oh boy, were they staggering. The coronation cost a whopping £1, 57 million, which is about £43 million in today's money. That's a lot of crowns and carriages. The Abbey, a 700-year-old masterpiece of Gothic architecture, was dressed up with carpets, drapes, and enough flowers to make a florist weep with joy. Thousands of dignitaries and guests packed the nave, while outside, over 3 million people lined the streets of London, braving the rain just to catch a glimpse of the newly crowned Queen. It's hard not to admire the commitment, even if it did involve standing for hours under a drizzly British sky. Now, let's dive into the television aspect, because this is where things get interesting. The decision to broadcast the coronation was more than just a nod to modernity. It was a strategic move to democratize the monarchy. For the first time, ordinary folks could witness the crowning of a monarch without needing an invite from the palace. It was a spectacle that turned living rooms into royal box seats, bridging the gap between the crown and the commoner. It was a bold move that paid off, cementing Elizabeth's image as a modern monarch for a new age. But here's the kicker. The royal family wasn't entirely sold on the idea. Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip, was all for it, seeing television as a way to connect with a wider audience. The old guard, however, was less enthusiastic, fearing it would strip away the mystique of the ceremony. The Queen herself was reportedly hesitant, concerned about the intrusion of cameras in such a sacred setting. Yet in the end, tradition bowed to technology, and the world watched as the crown was placed on Elizabeth's head, cementing her status as the people's queen. The coronation wasn't just a royal affair, it was a national event. Street parties popped up like daisies in spring as communities gathered to celebrate their new queen. The day was a mix of solemnity and jubilation, with echoes of "God Save the Queen" ringing from every corner of the kingdom. It was a moment of unity in a post-war Britain still grappling with rationing and economic recovery. The coronation was a reminder that, despite the hardships, there was still room for pageantry and pride. But here's where we peel back the layers of grandeur and ask the uncomfortable questions. Was all this spectacle just a grand distraction from the realities of a nation still finding its feet after the war? Or was it a necessary reaffirmation of tradition and continuity in a rapidly changing world? It's a debate that continues to this day, balancing the scales between spectacle and substance, between the allure of the crown and its actual role in a constitutional monarchy. Coronation wasn't merely about Elizabeth becoming queen. It was about a monarchy adapting to survive in the age of television. It was about embracing change while preserving tradition, a delicate dance that would define Elizabeth's reign. She became the face of a monarchy that was both ancient and modern, a symbol of continuity in a world in flux. As the television cameras panned across the Abbey, capturing every detail of the ceremony, they also captured the essence of anew. The coronation was a pivotal moment, not just in Elizabeth's life, but in the life of the nation. It marked the beginning of a reign that would witness unprecedented social and technological change, a reign that would see the monarchy navigate the choppy waters of modernity with grace and resilience. And so, as the crown was placed on her head, Elizabeth wasn't just becoming a queen. She was becoming a symbol of hope and continuity for a nation in transition, a queen for the television age, bringing the grandeur of the throne into the heart of every home, one broadcast at a time. But don't go thinking that all this pageantry meant the monarchy was simply a relic of the past, dressed up for the cameras. The coronation was just the beginning of Elizabeth's journey as a modern monarch, a journey that would see her balancing the weight of tradition with the demands of a changing world, proving that even the oldest of institutions can adapt and endure. And that's a story we'll continue to unravel, one crown jewel at a time. As Elizabeth's coronation faded into memory, the young queen stepped into the vibrant, tumultuous landscape of the 1960s, a decade that would have made even the most seasoned monarchs reach for their smelling salts. The 60s were a time of seismic cultural shifts, where Britain traded its stovepipes for miniskirts, and the monarchy had to keep pace with a society that was shedding its old skin faster than you could say Beatlemania. Speaking of monumental shifts, let's talk about the swinging 60s and Elizabeth's role in the Commonwealth, a sprawling patchwork of nations that was less about empire and more about evolution. By the mid-20th century, the sun had indeed set on the British Empire, leaving behind a Commonwealth that was essentially the empire's cooler, more inclusive sibling. Elizabeth, with her knack for diplomacy, became the glue holding this diverse collection of countries together. Her visits were less about imperial oversight and more about fostering a sense of shared identity. She traveled over 40,000 miles in 1953-54 alone, visiting 13 countries in 6 months. If frequent flyer miles were a thing back then, she'd have been platinum status in no time. But let's not romanticize this too much. The transition from empire to Commonwealth wasn't all cumbayas and cultural exchanges. It was fraught with tension, especially as countries sought independence. Elizabeth's role was a tightrope walk, balancing the legacy of colonialism with the promise of partnership. It was less about waving from balconies and more about understanding the complex histories and aspirations of these nations. Her role was akin to a global diplomat, managing to keep the Commonwealth relevant in a rapidly decolonizing world. And let's be honest, that's about as easy as herding cats on roller skates. Now, while Elizabeth was busy playing international peacemaker, back home things were getting a bit, well, economically crunchy. The British economy in the 60s was about as steady as a three-legged chair. The country was grappling with a series of economic crises that would make any monarch question their life choices. Inflation was on the rise, the pound was under pressure, and let's not forget the infamous devaluation in 1967. Harold Wilson, the then Prime Minister, tried to assure everyone that the pound in your pocket remained unchanged, but the truth was harder to swallow than a plate of overcooked Brussels sprouts. Elizabeth's reign during this time wasn't just about cutting ribbons and attending galas. It was about embodying stability amidst economic turbulence. The 60s also brought about a cultural revolution that challenged traditional norms. The monarchy had to navigate this new world where class structures were being questioned, and the youth were ready to rewrite the rules. Elizabeth's ability to remain relevant, while also appearing timeless, was a testament to her adaptability, a trait more often associated with chameleons than crowns. And speaking of adaptability, the Queen's personal life had its own share of quirky moments. Enter Coco the corgi, one of Elizabeth's many canine companions. Now, if you've ever had a pet that seemed to think it was the ruler of the household, you'll understand Elizabeth's predicament. Coco, with all the regal bearing of a furry footstool, once caused a diplomatic kerfuffle by interrupting a state dinner, attempting to abscond with a particularly enticing canapé. It was a moment of levity amidst the gravitas of royal duties, a reminder that not even a queen is immune to the unpredictable whims of a determined pup. As the 60s rolled into the 70s, the challenges didn't let up. If anything, they took on a new flavor, much like the dubious culinary concoctions of the decade. The oil crisis of 1973 hit Britain hard, sending shockwaves through the economy and leaving the government scrambling to keep the lights on, literally. Enter the era of the 3-day workweek, a radical measure designed to conserve electricity during a time when energy was as scarce as a sunny day in Edinburgh. Elizabeth, ever the stalwart symbol of continuity, navigated these choppy waters with her trademark poise. Her role was less about dictating policy and more about providing a sense of assurance that the ship of state wasn't about to capsize. It was during these trying times that the monarchy's symbolic value truly shone. As the nation faced economic uncertainty, Elizabeth remained a constant, a reminder that while governments may falter, the crown endures. But let's not sugarcoat it. The monarchy wasn't immune to criticism. Voices questioning its relevance grew louder, particularly as Britain grappled with modernity. The Queen's expenses, the royal palaces, and the opulence that came with the crown were under scrutiny. Yet, through it all, Elizabeth managed to maintain public support. Her secret, a deft balance between tradition and modernization, like a chef who knows just when to add a pinch of salt to an already perfect dish. Navigating the often choppy seas of diplomacy, Elizabeth's reign was also marked by her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Her visits to various Commonwealth nations were less about ticking boxes and more about genuine engagement, whether it was dancing with locals in Ghana or donning traditional attire in Pakistan. Elizabeth made an effort to understand and respect the cultures she encountered. It was this personal touch that endeared her to millions around the globe, turning what could have been mere ceremonial obligations into meaningful exchanges. The 60s and 70s were a time of transformation, not just for Britain, but for the monarchy itself. Elizabeth adapted to these changes with a quiet determination, proving that even the most ancient of institutions could evolve without losing its essence. As the world hurtled towards the uncertain future of the late 20th century, Elizabeth's reign stood as a testament to the power of adaptability, resilience, and a good dose of humor. Because let's face it, when your corgi is causing a diplomatic incident, sometimes laughter really is the best policy. So, while the monarchy danced to the rhythm of a changing world, Elizabeth continued her reign with a blend of grace and grit, a queen in tune with the times, yet timeless in her appeal. As we leave this chapter of her story, it's clear that Elizabeth's reign was more than just a series of state functions and royal tours. It was a journey of navigating a rapidly changing world with both feet firmly planted on the ground and a corgi by her side. Now, as we pivot from the optimism of royal tours and diplomatic dances, let's tumble headfirst into the year that might as well have been sponsored by Murphy's Law. That's right, we're diving into Elizabeth's Annus Horribilis of 1992, a year so full of drama, it makes the latest Netflix series look like a knitting circle. Brace yourselves, it's a doozy. First up on this merry-go-round of misfortune, we have the royal divorces. Yes, plural. Elizabeth watched as count M, three of her children's marriages publicly unraveled faster than my New Year's resolutions. Princess Anne, the Queen's only daughter, kicked things off by splitting from her husband Mark Phillips in April. Then came the marital implosion of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, with their separation announced in March. And lest we forget, Prince Charles and Princess Diana's marriage was crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny and private grievances, culminating in their separation announcement in December. It was a tabloid dream, or nightmare, depending on whose side you were on. Speaking of which, the media had a field day. If you thought paparazzi antics were wild today, the 90s were like the Wild West of royal reportage. Every spat, every sideways glance was blown up into a headline worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy. And let's face it, the royals didn't do themselves any favors. Who could forget the infamous toe-sucking incident involving Sarah Ferguson? It's a moment that will forever live in infamy. One of those facepalm moments where you wonder if the palace had a secret bunker full of public relations, experts crying into their tea. But this wasn't just tabloid fodder. The divorces raised serious questions about the monarchy's role in a modern society. Here was an institution that prided itself on stability and continuity, suddenly looking as fragile as a soap bubble. The public started to question the fairy tale narrative, that one where royals lived happily ever after in a land of castles and corgis. The reality was much more complicated, and it forced the monarchy to reckon with its image in a world that was less interested in fairy tales and more in authenticity. Then came the Windsor Castle fire in November. If the year was a storm, this was the lightning strike that hit right at the heart of the monarchy. The fire raged for 15 hours, destroying 115 rooms and costing an estimated £36, $5 million to restore. It was the kind of disaster that would have sent any normal family scrambling for a strong drink. For the royal family, it was a literal and metaphorical blow, one that sent smoke signals to the entire world. The monarchy was not invincible. Public reaction was mixed, to say the least. On one hand, there was genuine sympathy for the loss of a cultural treasure. On the other, the question of who would foot the repair bill ignited a debate harder than the fire itself. The Queen agreed to open Buckingham Palace to the public, a move that not only raised funds, but also served as a gesture towards transparency. This was no small feat for an institution that had traditionally guarded its privacy as fiercely as a dragon guards its hoard. As the Annus Horribilis unfolded, Elizabeth's role as a symbol of stability was tested like never before. The monarchy had to evolve, and the Queen had to lead this transformation with her trademark stoicism. Her public response to the year's events was measured, acknowledging the trials while maintaining a stiff upper lip that would make even the most seasoned poker player envious. She gave a speech acknowledging the difficulties, a rare moment of vulnerability that showed the world a monarch who was not just a figurehead, but a human being dealing with very real challenges. The 1992 Annus Horribilis wasn't just about personal and institutional trials. It also highlighted the evolving role of the monarchy in a rapidly changing Britain. The monarchy had to navigate a society where traditional deference was giving way to a demand for accountability and relevance. The public wanted a monarchy that was more than just ceremonial, a monarchy that reflected contemporary values while preserving its historical significance. And let's not forget the economic context. Britain in the early 90s was grappling with a recession, with unemployment figures reaching 2.8 million at its peak. It was against this backdrop of financial uncertainty that the royals were expected to justify their existence. The monarchy's wealth and privilege came under scrutiny like never before, and the Queen's decision to start paying income tax in 1993 was a nod to the changing times. It was a move that signaled an awareness that the monarchy could no longer float above the fray, immune to the economic realities faced by the rest of the country. The Annus Horribilis of 1992 was a turning point, a year that forced the monarchy to take stock and adapt to a new era. It was a reminder that even the oldest institutions are not immune to the pressures of modern life. Yet, through it all, Elizabeth remained a steadfast figure, navigating the storms with a blend of grace and grit that had become her hallmark. In the end, the trials of 1992 didn't spell the end for the monarchy. Instead, they marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where transparency and modernization would play a crucial role. The Queen's ability to steer the monarchy through this tumultuous year was a testament to her resilience and adaptability, qualities that would continue to define her reign as she led the institution into the 21st century. As we leave this chapter hanging in the air like a cliffhanger in a particularly juicy soap opera, remember that the story of Elizabeth's reign is far from over. There's more to uncover, more to untangle, and more to admire as we continue to explore the life and times of Britain's longest-reigning monarch. Stay tuned, because this royal saga is far from finished. As we move beyond Elizabeth's Annus Horribilis and into the 21st century, let's talk about how she became the monarch who not only survived but thrived in the digital age. Now, if you think about it, Elizabeth's early reign was like a 1950s black and white film, stately, reserved, and oh so proper. Fast forward to the 2000s, and it's more like a YouTube clip, fast-paced, accessible, and occasionally featuring unexpected cameos. Yes, this was a new era where the monarchy had to embrace technology or risk becoming obsolete. From the moment the Queen sent her first email in 1976, she was already hinting at her willingness to embrace technology. And yes, you heard that right, 1976. The same year the Ramons were telling everyone to blitzkrieg Bob, Elizabeth was tapping away on a keyboard well ahead of her peers. But it wasn't until the 21st century that the monarchy fully plunged into the digital world. In 1997, the official royal website launched, and by 2009, the monarchy had taken its first tentative steps onto Twitter. By 2014, Elizabeth sent her first tweet, signing off with the kind of formality only a monarch could muster. Elizabeth R. Now, let's not pretend this digital leap was without its glitches. The internet didn't just open the palace gates to the public. It opened them to scrutiny, memes, and 1,000 think pieces questioning the monarchy's relevance. But Elizabeth, ever the unflappable figure, navigated this new landscape with a grace that would put most tech CEOs to shame. The royal family's YouTube channel, launched in 2007, showcased everything from state visits to the Queen's Christmas address, bringing the crown into the digital living room. This was a monarchy that understood the power of pixels and hashtags, a far cry from the days when royal fans had to catch a glimpse of the Queen from behind velvet ropes. While the monarchy was busy tweeting and posting, it was also adapting to a rapidly changing Britain. The country was grappling with issues like Brexit, which in 2016 saw the nation vote to leave the European Union, a decision that made the political landscape as turbulent as a cup of British tea in a typhoon. Elizabeth's role in all of this was to remain the calm eye of the storm, a symbol of continuity as the nation debated its future. While she didn't weigh in on political matters, her constitutional role demanded neutrality. Her presence was reassuring, like a lighthouse in a sea of uncertainty. It's this ability to remain steady that truly defined Elizabeth's legacy. Through wars, economic crises, and social upheavals, she stood as a constant. She was the monarch who witnessed the moon landing, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the rise of social media influencers, all while maintaining that same steady hand she displayed in her first televised Christmas message in 1957. And speaking of televised messages, let's remember the Queen's speech during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. It struck a chord across the globe, with its echoes of wartime resilience and the promise that we will meet again. This was Elizabeth at her best, offering comfort and continuity in a world turned upside down. Now, let's address the myths and realities of Elizabeth's reign. The myth that she was a distant figurehead, simply there to wave from balconies and cut ribbons. The reality, Elizabeth was a shrewd diplomat, a steadying presence who understood the power of soft diplomacy. Her numerous state visits and meetings with global leaders were not just ceremonial. They were key to maintaining Britain's influence in a post-imperial world. And let's not forget her legendary poker face, which could rival any seasoned card sharks, perfect for those tricky diplomatic discussions. In terms of economic context, Elizabeth's reign saw Britain transition from an industrial powerhouse to a service-based economy. The decline of traditional industries in the 1980, the financial boom of the 1990, and the credit crunch of 2008 all shaped the nation she reigned over. Through it all, the monarchy had to justify its relevance, balancing the books while remaining a beacon of tradition. The Queen's decision to open Buckingham Palace to the public and later to pay taxes was more than a nod to modernity. It was a recognition that the monarchy had to adapt or face irrelevance. As we wrap up this royal saga, let's reflect on Elizabeth's ability to remain both beloved and scrutinized. She was a figure who inspired admiration and critique in equal measure. The public adored her for her unwavering dedication, yet questioned the institution she represented. Her legacy is one of resilience, adaptability, and a touch of humor, qualities that ensured her place as Britain's longest-reigning monarch. In the end, Elizabeth's reign was a testament to the power of evolution within tradition. She showed that even the most storied institutions could adapt to the demands of modern life without losing their essence. So, as we bid adieu to this chapter of history, let's remember that Elizabeth wasn't just a queen. She was a living symbol of continuity in a world that never stops changing. In an era where change is the only constant, her legacy is a reminder that sometimes the most enduring power is the ability to adapt. The sun creeps over the horizon, casting a golden glow on Tenochtitlan's sprawling brilliance. You're waking up in the heart of what some might call the Venice of the Americas, though that's a bit like calling the Grand Canyon a nice little ditch. Tenochtitlan is a masterpiece of Aztec engineering, with its network of canals and causeways, all resting on an island smack dab in Lake Texcoco. You can practically hear the city waking up as the markets kick into gear, promising a day of bustling trade and sensory overload. As you shake off the last remnants of sleep, the air is already buzzing with the scent of fresh tortillas and the unmistakable aroma of burning copal incense drifting from the nearby temples. Breakfast for an average Aztec citizen is simple yet satisfying. Think tamales or a steaming bowl of adol, a thick, hearty drink made from maize. Maize, after all, is not just a crop here. It's a way of life. It's the backbone of the Aztec diet, the stuff of legends and daily sustenance wrapped into one. Without maize, the Aztec Empire might as well be a sandcastle waiting for the tide. Time to hit the marketplace, because the city's heart isn't just the temples or the opulent palaces of the elite, but the bustling streets where commerce reigns supreme. The Tenochtitlan market is your destination, a place so vast it makes your local flea market look like a yard sale. Traders flock here from all over, peddling everything from vibrant feathers to obsidian blades sharper than your wit on a good day. As you wander through the stalls, it's clear that the Aztec marketplace is a kaleidoscope of color and sound. Vendors shout their prices, and the cacophony of bargaining fills the air. Now, let's talk numbers, because they reveal the scale of this operation. Around 60,000 people might pass through this market on a busy day. That's a crowd that would make a rock concert seem intimate. Your first stop is a stall piled high with chili peppers in every hue imaginable. These little firecrackers are more than just a spice. They're a staple, an essential part of Aztec cuisine. And speaking of heat, have you ever tried Aztec hot chocolate? It's not the sweet, comforting drink you might be used to. Nope, this is chocolate with a kick, often spiced with chili or flavored with vanilla, another Aztec innovation. In Tenochtitlan, chocolate isn't just for dessert. It's an energizing drink, a currency, and a luxury all wrapped into one. Ah, the allure of cacao beans, so valuable they were used as money. Imagine paying for your groceries with chocolate. It sounds dreamy, but it also makes you wonder how they resisted the temptation to eat their savings. Historical records suggest that a turkey might cost you about 100 cacao beans, and a tomato could be had for just a single bean. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. And while we're debunking myths, let's tackle the idea that the Aztecs were all about human sacrifice all the time. Sure, it happened, but daily life was more about trade, agriculture, and yes, chocolate. The market is a place where you can see the real pulse of the city, far from the dramatic tales of blood and conquest. But back to the stalls, where you meet a vendor selling rich, earthy vanilla. This aromatic part is native to the region, and the Aztecs are among the first to cultivate it. It's often paired with chocolate, both in the sacred rituals and in the everyday indulgences of the elite. The vendor regales you with tales of how Montezuma himself might have sipped on his chocolate, spiced with vanilla and served in a golden goblet that would make any modern-day coffee snob green with envy. As the sun climbs higher, the market seems to pulse with life. Buyers and sellers haggle over everything from textiles woven in vibrant patterns to obsidian tools that reflect the skill of their makers. The Aztecs excelled in crafting with obsidian, volcanic glass that was sharper than the best steel Europe had at the time. Here, you can purchase a blade that could serve as both a tool and a weapon, a necessity in a world where practical items often doubled as art. You pass by a vendor selling maize in every conceivable form, kernels, flour, dough. It's a reminder that this crop is more than food. It's a cornerstone of civilization. The Aztecs believed they were created from maize, and their entire existence, from the economy to religion, was intertwined with this humble plant. A single cob of maize might cost you a few cacao beans, but its value is priceless in the grand tapestry of Aztec life. As you continue through the market, you notice the intricate shell jewelry glinting in the sun. These pieces are highly prized, not just for their beauty, but for their symbolism. Shells are linked to the water deities, a tangible connection to the life-giving lakes and rivers that surround Tenochtitlan. The city, after all, is a testament to the Aztecs' mastery of water management, with its network of aqueducts and chinampas, floating gardens that provided much of the city's food. And speaking of food, your stomach is starting to growl, reminding you that it's time for a snack. Perhaps a tlacoyo, a hearty morsel made from masa, topped with beans, cheese, or meat. It's a common street food, a taste of everyday Aztec life that's both filling and flavorful. As you savor your snack, you can't help but marvel at the scale and scope of this market. It's a bustling hub where culture, economy, and daily life collide, a microcosm of the Aztec Empire's complexity. And while it's easy to get swept up in the romantic imagery of a vibrant, bustling market, it's also worth noting the harsh realities. The Aztec economy was a well-oiled machine, but it was built on the backs of a rigid class system and a tributary empire where conquered peoples paid the price. Yet here in the market, there's a sense of community, a shared experience that transcends the social hierarchies. Whether you're a noble or a commoner, a trader or a buyer, the market is a place where everyone comes together, united by the need for food, goods, and the latest gossip. As the morning stretches toward noon, the sun high in the sky, you're ready to leave the market behind, your senses satiated, and your bags filled with the day's purchases. But as you make your way back through the canals and streets of Tenochtitlan, carry with you a deeper understanding of this incredible city, a place where ancient traditions and daily realities intertwine in a dance as intricate as the weaving on a prized Aztec textile. As you drift away from the market, the midday sun casts Tenochtitlan in a different light, illuminating the city's ingenious infrastructure. You're about to discover that this place is less primitive society and more ancient engineering marvel. Let's start with those aqueducts. Built with the precision of a Swiss watch, these water highways flowed from the hills of Chapultepec, channeling fresh water across the city. Picture dual pipes, one in use, the other for maintenance, proving the Aztecs understood the value of a backup plan long before the IT crowd made it cool. Now, consider the labor force that brought these hydraulic wonders to life. Forget machines. This was the age of hands-on craftsmanship. Thousands of workers, organized like you wouldn't believe, it happened. And here's where it gets juicy. The Aztec labor system was built on a foundation of communal service. Call it a civic duty, if you will. Every citizen was expected to contribute, making the construction of these aqueducts a true community project. So, next time you're stuck in a boring town hall meeting, remember that civic engagement once meant building infrastructure that could withstand the ages. The aqueducts weren't alone in showcasing Aztec prowess. Tenochtitlan's causeways were a testament to their urban planning genius. These were no mere paths. They were elevated highways cutting through Lake Texcoco, linking the city to the mainland with a flair that modern urban planners might envy. Each causeway was wide enough to accommodate two-way foot traffic and could be raised to allow canoes to pass underneath. Talk about pedestrian-friendly design. These causeways were the veins of the city, pumping life into Tenochtitlan as thousands of people traversed them daily. Here's the kicker. These causeways didn't just connect points A and B. They were strategic, playing a crucial role in the city's defense. In times of trouble, sections could be dismantled to thwart invaders. So, if you thought retractable bridges were a modern invention, the Aztecs might have something to say about that. And while we're on the topic of myths, let's bust another one. The Aztecs were no strangers to urban planning. Their city was laid out in a grid pattern, a design choice that would make any contemporary city planner nod in approval. The labor system that underpinned all this was as complex as the city itself. It was a mix of tribute labor, where conquered peoples contributed to the empire's grandeur, and kalpuli, a form of neighborhood organization that got things done locally. In the kalpuli system, each district had its own leaders and responsibilities, ensuring that no part of the city was left high and dry. If you're thinking this sounds vaguely familiar, you're not wrong. Modern cities often operate with a similar mix of central authority and local governance. But here's a spicy tidbit. The workers didn't just toil for the empire's glory. They were compensated in kind, often with food, clothing, or tools. This barter system kept the economy humming and ensured that even those at the bottom of the social ladder had a stake in the city's success. So, while the Western world was fumbling with feudalism, the Aztecs were crafting a system that was both equitable and efficient. As you wander through the midday bustle, the streets are alive with foot traffic. It's a vibrant scene that could rival any modern metropolis. People of all classes mingle here, from nobles in their finery to commoners in simpler garb, all navigating the city's organized chaos. The sheer volume of humanity underscores the fact that Tenochtitlan was one of the largest cities in the world at the time, with a population rivaling that of contemporary European capitals. This melting pot of activity wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was a social fabric, woven with threads of commerce, politics, and community. In a world where the average person walked everywhere, these streets were the lifeblood of daily life, connecting the city's 200,000 residents in a dynamic tapestry of human interaction. As you stroll, take a moment to appreciate the chinampers, those floating gardens we mentioned earlier. These agricultural wonders were another stroke of Aztec ingenuity. By creating fertile plots on the lake's surface, the Aztecs maximized their arable land, turning water into food. Each chinamper was a mini-farm, capable of producing up to 7 harvests a year. It's like having a community garden on steroids, and it explains why Tenochtitlan was able to sustain such a large population. These innovations in urban planning and agriculture weren't just about survival. They were a testament to the Aztec belief in balance and harmony with nature. The city was a living organism, thriving on the symbiotic relationship between people and their environment. This holistic approach to urban life might make you rethink what you know about sustainable living. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows, you're left marveling at the Aztecs' ability to blend practicality with artistry. Their infrastructure was more than just functional. It was a reflection of a society that valued community, resourcefulness, and innovation. So, next time someone dismisses ancient civilizations as primitive, you can remind them that Tenochtitlan was a thriving hub of human achievement long before the term smart city was ever coined. And just as you're about to dive deeper into this vibrant urban landscape, remember, we've only scratched the surface of what makes Tenochtitlan tick. There's more to uncover about this remarkable city, from its political machinations to the cultural tapestry that held it all together. Stay tuned. Our journey through the heart of the Aztec Empire is far from over. As we journey deeper into Tenochtitlan's vibrant heart, the afternoon sun beckons us toward Tlaxcala, the bustling twin city to Tenochtitlan, and the pulsating core of Aztec political and religious life. Now, if you think modern politics is convoluted, just wait until you unravel the power play in this ancient metropolis. The Aztecs took governance to a whole new level, blending it seamlessly with their religious beliefs, like a political smoothie. Let's start with the priesthood, the power players dressed in ritual garb, wielding influence like a CEO at a shareholder meeting. The Aztec priests were more than just spiritual guides. They were astronomers, architects, and advisors, holding the keys to both heaven and earth. Their calendar, a marvel of mathematical precision, dictated the rhythm of life, from agricultural cycles to festival dates. And while we're talking numbers, consider this. The Aztec calendar was so precise, it was only off by a fraction of a day compared to our modern Gregorian calendar. That's some serious timekeeping chops. These priests weren't just about chanting and incense, though. They were deeply intertwined with the political machinations of the ruling class, acting as the bridge between the people and the gods. In a world where divine favor was as coveted as gold, the priests had the power to make or break kings. The great Templo-Mayor, the focal point of religious life, was where the magic, or depending on your perspective, the menace, happened. It was the beating heart of the Aztec capital, a place where the sacred and the secular danced an intricate tango. The Templo-Mayor was more than just a place of worship. It was a symbol of Aztec dominance. Rising 60 meters into the sky, it was a skyscraper of spiritual significance, dedicated to two gods, Huitzilopochtli, the warrior god of the sun, and Tlaloc, the rain god. This dual dedication was no accident. It showcased the Aztec understanding of balance, war and water, power and sustenance. The temple's construction was an architectural feat, with each layer representing a conquest or tribute from a neighboring region. Think of it as a vertical history book, each chapter written in stone. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather, the sacrificial knife, in the room, human sacrifice. Hollywood loves to paint this with a broad, bloody brush, often missing the cultural context that made these rituals anything but mindless violence. Sacrifice was a profound act, believed to nourish the gods and ensure the continued existence of the world. It was cosmic maintenance, Aztec style. The practice was rooted in their creation myth, where gods sacrificed themselves to set the sun in motion. In a society where reciprocity was sacred, human sacrifice was seen as a necessary exchange to keep the cosmic wheels turning. The scale of these sacrifices is staggering. During the dedication of the Templo-Mayor in 1487, it's estimated that thousands were sacrificed over several days. Numbers vary, but some accounts suggest as many as 20,000. It's hard to fathom such a scale, and while it might sound like something out of a horror flick, for the Aztecs, it was a demonstration of power and devotion. Sacrifices were often prisoners of war, and their deaths were meant to reaffirm the might of the Aztec Empire, sending a clear message to allies and enemies alike. The gods favored the Aztecs, and their empire was one to be reckoned with. But let's not romanticize this too much. The harsh reality was that these rituals were brutal, and for those at the sharp end of the obsidian blade, there was nothing sacred about it. The Aztecs believed the heart was the seat of the soul, and offering it to the gods was the ultimate gift. It's a concept that, while fascinating, underscores the stark differences between their worldview and ours. This was an era where life and death were two sides of the same obsidian coin, each with its own value and role in the cosmic order. As you stand in the shadow of the Templo Mayor, the air thick with the weight of history, it's clear why this place was the epicenter of Aztec life. It was here that politics and religion merged into a singular force, one that shaped the empire's destiny. The temple wasn't just a religious site. It was a statement of power, a testament to the Aztecs' understanding of their place in the universe. But it was also a reminder of the human cost of that power, a cost paid in blood and bone. Leaving the towering stones of Templo Mayor behind, we wander into the political arena of Tenochtitlan, where the ruling class schemed and strategized like chess grandmasters on caffeine. The Aztec political structure was as intricate as their calendar, with the Tenochtitlan, or emperor, sitting at the top. This wasn't a job for the faint-hearted. It required a delicate balance of diplomacy, warfare, and religious duty. The Tenochtitlan was considered semi-divine, a representative of the gods on Earth, tasked with maintaining cosmic order through conquest and sacrifice. The Aztec Empire wasn't built in a day, nor was it maintained by goodwill alone. It was a tributary empire, with each conquered region expected to pay tribute in goods and people, a system that fueled both the Aztec economy and their sacrificial needs. If you think taxes are a modern nuisance, imagine paying them in cacao beans, textiles, or even human lives. This system was the backbone of the empire, a network of obligations and loyalties that kept the wheels turning. But it was also a powder keg of resentment, with subject peoples chafing under Aztec rule, a resentment that would eventually be exploited by a certain group of Spanish conquistadors. Political intrigue was the name of the game in Tenochtitlan, a place where alliances were forged and broken with the same deftness as a priest wielding an obsidian blade. Here, the noble class played a high-stakes game of thrones, navigating the treacherous waters of Aztec politics with a skill that would make Machiavelli nod in approval. It was a world where power was both currency and weapon, where the ability to read the celestial signs could make or break a ruler. And while we're on the topic of rulers, let's not forget the role of women in this political tapestry. Contrary to popular belief, Aztec women were not just silent figures on the sidelines. Noble women wielded significant influence, often acting as advisors or even regents when necessary. They were the power behind the throne, whisper in the emperor's ear, and their contributions, though often overlooked, were crucial to the functioning of the empire. As the afternoon sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza, you can't help but marvel at the complexity of Aztec society. It was a world where religion and politics were two sides of the same coin, each reinforcing the other in a cosmic dance of power and belief. The Aztecs understood that their empire was more than just territory. It was an idea, a vision of a universe in constant balance, maintained through human effort and divine favor. But as we prepare to leave Tenochtitlan behind, remember, there's still more to explore in this captivating city. The evening beckons, offering a chance to delve deeper into the cultural tapestry of Tenochtitlan, to uncover the stories of art, music, and daily life that made this city a vibrant hub of human achievement. Stay tuned, because the saga of the Aztec Empire is just heating up. As the vibrant day in Tenochtitlan continues, we pivot from the political chessboard to the bustling hive of creativity that is the city's artisans' workshops. Welcome to the Aztec version of the Renaissance, where the hum of activity rivals Silicon Valley on a caffeine binge. Here, the artisans are not just surviving, they're thriving, crafting goods that would make any modern Etsy shop green with envy. First up, let's talk textiles. The Aztecs were masters of the loom, weaving vibrant cloth that was as much a statement of social status as it was a work of art. Picture this: cotton and magi fibers spun into intricate patterns, each design telling a story more complex than your favorite Netflix drama. These textiles weren't just for keeping warm, they were currency, status symbols, and even diplomatic gifts. A particularly fine cloak might cost you a small fortune, but it was worth every cacao bean, especially if you wanted to turn heads at the next temple festival. And then there's the jewelry. Oh, the jewelry. Forget about your weekend arts and crafts fair. The Aztec artisans were producing bling that would put modern jewelers to shame. Gold, turquoise, jade. These were the materials of choice, transformed into pieces so intricate they'd make Fabergé look like an amateur. The Aztecs valued turquoise as highly as gold, believing it to be a piece of fallen sky. Imagine paying for your morning adol with a pendant carved from jade, a stone so revered it was thought to hold life itself. Jewelry was more than mere decoration. It was a declaration of divine favor, a way to show that the gods were smiling directly on you. Now, let's address that nagging myth that the Aztecs were isolated, a culture untouched by the outside world. The reality: they were plugged into an international trade network that would make today's globalists beam with pride. Tenochtitlan was a buzzing hub of commerce, with goods flowing in from as far as the Maya lands to the south and the deserts of the north. Picture a thriving marketplace where you could pick up a string of Pacific pearls or a bag of cochineal dye, the latter so valuable it would later paint European fashion red. Literally. You might be wondering how these artisans kept up with demand. Enter the Kalpuli, a social unit that was equal parts family and business. Each Kalpuli specialized in a particular craft or trade, ensuring that skill and knowledge were passed down through generations like a beloved family recipe. This setup wasn't just about keeping the economy buzzing. It was a social glue, binding people together with a shared purpose and identity. It's like a medieval LinkedIn, minus the spammy connection requests. However, let's not get too swept up in the romantic image of bustling workshops and thriving trade. The reality of being an artisan in Tenochtitlan had its own challenges. The class system was rigid, and upward mobility was rarer than a solar eclipse. Most artisans were born into their trade, with little chance of breaking free from the mold. It was a world where your destiny was often predetermined by the loom or the forge, and while the work was respected, it didn't always translate into riches. Still, the artisans of Tenochtitlan were integral to the city's economy, their work a testament to human ingenuity and creativity. Their goods were in demand not just in the city, but across the empire, traded along routes that crisscrossed the Aztec world like veins in a living organism. This network of trade was the empire's lifeblood, a complex system of barter and tribute that kept the wheels of commerce turning. As we delve deeper into the workshops, let's not forget the role of women in this vibrant economy. Women were often the unsung heroes of the artisan world, weaving cloth and crafting goods alongside their male counterparts. In fact, they were so integral to textile production that a woman's skill at the loom was a key factor in marriage negotiations. They were more than just helpmates. They were business partners, their work a vital contribution to the family's wealth and status. The artisans' guilds weren't just about commerce. They were cultural hubs, places where art, religion, and daily life intertwined. Each piece of jewelry or textile carried symbolic weight, reflecting the spiritual beliefs and social norms of the time. The Aztecs didn't separate art from life. They wove it into the very fabric of their existence, creating a culture as rich and complex as the patterns on their prized textiles. As you wander through the workshops, you can't help but notice the sense of community, the shared pride in craftsmanship that transcends the rigid class lines. In a world where the gods were as much a part of daily life as the sunrise, each piece crafted was an offering, a testament to the divine inspiration that guided the artisan's hands. It's a heady mix of creativity and commerce, a reminder that the story of Tenochtitlan is not just one of conquest and sacrifice, but of human achievement and artistic expression. As the afternoon light fades, casting long shadows across the city, you're left with a deeper appreciation for the artisans who shaped this vibrant metropolis, their legacy written not in stone, but in the delicate interplay of color and form. So, as the sun sets on another day in Tenochtitlan, remember that while we've explored the workshops and markets, we've only begun to uncover the full tapestry of Aztec life. There's still more to discover in this remarkable city, from the cultural rituals that defined personal and communal identity to the ever-present dance between the sacred and the secular. Stay tuned, because the story of the Aztec Empire is far from over, and there's always more history to uncover when the city never really sleeps. As twilight descends on Tenochtitlan, the city transforms into a tableau of flickering torchlight and murmuring shadows. It's a time when the bustling marketplace gives way to quieter streets, and the pulse of daily life slows to a contemplative rhythm. This is the perfect moment to reflect on the social structures that held this empire together, like the intricate threads of a woven tapestry. Let's zero in on the Calpuli, the bedrock of Aztec society. Picture them as neighborhood clans, each one a tight-knit community with its own leaders, responsibilities, and naturally, a healthy dose of local gossip. There were around 20 Calpuli in Tenochtitlan, each functioning like a microcosm of the empire. They managed everything from education to religious ceremonies, providing a safety net in a world that could be as precarious as a tightrope walk over Lake Texcoco. Each Calpuli was tasked with specific duties, often tied to a particular trade or craft. Think of it as a medieval LinkedIn, but with more face-to-face networking and fewer unsolicited connection requests. The Calpuli ensured that skills and knowledge were passed down through generations, creating a strong sense of identity and belonging. It was a system that blurred the lines between family and community, much like today's social networks, but with a lot more at stake than just social clout. Now, let's talk about the economic backbone of these clans. The Calpuli were responsible for collecting and distributing tribute, a system that was both a blessing and a burden. Tribute came in many forms: maize, textiles, or even labor, and was essential for maintaining the empire's grandeur. This system ensured that resources flowed from the periphery to the heart of the empire, fueling the Aztec machine. It was a delicate balance, requiring a deft hand to keep everything running smoothly, much like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. But here's the kicker. The Calpuli weren't just about economics. They were a vital part of the social fabric, offering a sense of stability in a world where the whims of guards and emperors could change everything overnight. They were the original think tanks, community centers, and HR departments rolled into one. The leaders of each Calpuli, often elders respected for their wisdom and experience, held sway over local matters, ensuring that the needs of their people were met. In many ways, they were the unsung heroes of the Aztec Empire, the glue that held everything together even as the political winds shifted. Speaking of shifting winds, let's address the elephant in the room, the Spanish conquest. The tale of Cortés and his merry band of conquistadors. It's a story that's often portrayed as a straightforward conquest, but the reality is more akin to a complex chess game with no clear winner. When Hernán Cortés arrived in 1519, he encountered an empire that was already straining under its own weight, its tributary system, a powder keg of discontent just waiting for a spark. Cortés, ever the opportunist, played the role of matchmaker, forming alliances with disgruntled tributary states who were more than happy to see the Aztecs knocked down a peg. The Spanish arrival wasn't just about military might. It was a masterclass in political manipulation. With a little help from European diseases and a lot of strategic thinking, Cortés managed to bring the mighty Aztec Empire to its knees by 1521. But let's not kid ourselves. The so-called conquest was less about brute force and more about exploiting existing fractures within the empire. Now, here's where the story takes an interesting turn. The Aztecs may have lost the battle, but their cultural legacy is anything but vanquished. The echoes of their influence resonate through modern Mexico, from the maize-based diet to the vibrant celebrations that punctuate the calendar. The Aztec language, Nahuatl, is still spoken by over 1 million people today, a testament to the enduring power of their cultural footprint. And let's not forget the city itself. The ruins of Tenochtitlan still lie beneath the bustling streets of modern-day Mexico City, a silent reminder of the vibrant metropolis that once stood there. The Aztec influence can be seen in the art, the architecture, and even in the spirit of the people, a resilience that defies the passage of time and the tides of history. So, as night fully envelops Tenochtitlan, we find ourselves reflecting on the legacy of this remarkable civilization. The Aztecs were a people of contradictions, fierce yet sophisticated, warlike yet deeply spiritual. Theirs was a world where the sacred and the secular were inextricably linked, a dance of power and belief that continues to captivate our imaginations. In the end, the story of the Aztec Empire is not just a tale of rise and fall. It's a reminder of the complexity of human societies, of the intricate web of relationships and responsibilities that define us. As we step away from this ancient city, we carry with us a deeper understanding of the Aztec legacy, a legacy that, much like the city itself, remains alive beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered and reimagined. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of Tenochtitlan's vibrant history lull you into dreams of a world where the past and present collide in a tapestry as rich and intricate as the empire itself. In the bustling corridors of ancient Rome, where politics was as cutthroat as a gladiatorial bout, one teenager's ascent to power was the talk of the town. Enter Nero, a 16-year-old who wasn't just any kid on the block. He was an emperor to be, courtesy of his family lineage that was as tangled as a Roman toga. But before we dive into the drama of his reign, let's unravel how Nero went from a youth with a questionable haircut to the ruler of the Roman Empire. Nero was born Lucius Domitius Ahenarbarbus in 37 AD, a name that might sound like a Harry Potter spell, but was, in fact, as Roman as they come. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was every bit as ambitious as her son would later become infamous for being. Agrippina was part of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which, if you need a refresher, was the same dynasty that brought us Julius Caesar's adopted heir Augustus. So, Nero was practically born with a laurel wreath on his head and a target on his back. Let's talk about Agrippina, a woman whose ambition could rival that of any character in a daytime soap opera. She was the sister of Emperor Caligula, a man whose reign was so notoriously bizarre that it included making his horse a consul. Yes, you heard that right, an actual horse. Agrippina wasn't about to let her family's legacy die out in the midst of Caligula's madness. After Caligula's assassination, she skillfully maneuvered through the political chessboard of Rome, marrying her uncle, Emperor Claudius, because, you know, why not keep it in the family? Agrippina's marriage to Claudius was more than a touch of the bizarre. It was a strategic move that would eventually pave the way for Nero's rise to power, with Claudius firmly in her grasp, thanks to a mix of charm and what some historians suspect was a penchant for poisoning. Agrippina saw to it that Nero was adopted as Claudius's son and heir, leapfrogging over Claudius's biological son, Britannicus. Talk about cutting in line. In 54 AD, when Nero was just 16 years old, Claudius conveniently bit the dust, and rumors swirled that Agrippina might have had a hand in his untimely demise. Whether it was mushrooms laced with poison or just a bad case of indigestion, the truth remains as murky as the Tiber River. Regardless, Nero found himself the emperor of Rome, thanks to his mother's Machiavellian machinations. Now, if you think a teenage emperor sounds like a recipe for disaster, you'd be right, eventually. But hold your horses, or consuls, because Nero's first few years in power were surprisingly stable. This was largely due to his trusted advisors, Seneca, the philosopher, and Burrus, the Praetorian prefect. These guys were the real MVPs, keeping Nero's whims in check and the empire running like a well-oiled chariot. In his early reign, Nero was actually quite popular. He cut taxes, banned capital punishment, and even gave slaves the right to complain about their masters, a move that probably didn't earn him any dinner invitations from the Roman elite. He fancied himself a man of the people, often mingling incognito in the public baths and markets, though it's hard to imagine he went unnoticed given his penchant for extravagant clothing. Speaking of extravagance, let's not forget Nero's love for the arts. He was the original rock star emperor, albeit with more lyres than electric guitars. Nero fancied himself a performer, much to the horror of Roman nobles who believed emperors should stick to ruling, not singing. But Nero didn't care. He was the Kanye West of his day, convinced of his own genius and ready to show the world, one cringe-worthy performance at a time. Nero's youthful indulgences weren't just limited to the arts. He had a penchant for spending that would make a modern-day oligarch blush. He hosted lavish parties, complete with feasts that would put Thanksgiving dinners to shame. Peacock tongues and flamingo brains were just some of the delicacies on the menu, because why settle for turkey when you can have exotic bird brains? Despite his extravagance, Nero's early reign wasn't all bad press. Thanks to Seneca and Burrus, he made some rather decent decisions, like improving the empire's infrastructure and passing laws that were, dare we say, progressive. But this calm didn't last forever. You could say Nero's reign was like a Roman holiday. Starts off sunny and pleasant, then suddenly you're caught in a storm with no toga. As much as we joke about Nero's antics, it's important to remember that his rise to power wasn't just about personal ambition. It was emblematic of the intense political and social pressures of ancient Rome. The empire was a beast that required constant feeding, whether in the form of conquests, spectacles, or sheer political cunning. Nero was thrust into this world, armed with an outsized sense of self, and a mother whose ambition knew no limits. So, here we are, with Nero firmly planted on the throne, his advisors managing to keep the ship steady, and his mother shadowing his every move. This is just the beginning of what would become one of the most infamous reigns in Roman history. Remember, we're still in the calm before the storm. Nero's story is far from over, and the next chapters will dive into the chaos, conspiracies, and of course, the catastrophic fire that would define his legacy. But for now, let's leave young Nero in the glow of his early successes, blissfully unaware of the dramas yet to come. As Nero basked in the glow of his early successes, something curious was simmering beneath the surface, his burgeoning obsession with the arts. Now, you might think of emperors as stoic, marble-busting leaders, but Nero, he fancied himself more of an ancient rock star, minus the electric guitar, plus a lyre, and a flair for the dramatic that would put Broadway to shame. This wasn't just a hobby for Nero. It was a full-blown identity crisis with a side of delusion. Picture this, an emperor on stage, garlanded with laurels, belting out tunes and reciting poetry with the enthusiasm of a teenager at their first open mic night. Nero's performances were legendary, not necessarily because of his talent, but because of the sheer audacity of an emperor who thought he could moonlight as an artist. He even built a private theater, the Domus Aurea, a lavish palace complex that was as much a testament to his architectural ambition as it was to his theatrical aspirations. Unsurprisingly, the Roman elite were not impressed. To them, it was like watching a CEO abandon the boardroom for a stint on reality TV. The common folk, however, had mixed reactions. Some were entertained, while others were probably just there for the free wine and bread, because Nero knew how to draw a crowd with lavish spectacles. The Senate, on the other hand, was not exactly thrilled. To them, an emperor performing in public was akin to a modern president taking part in a reality dance-off. It was undignified, and more importantly, it was a sign that Nero might be losing touch with the gravitas of his role. And then there was the matter of the Olympic Games. Imagine the shockwaves when Nero decided to enter the chariot race in 67 AD. Now, the Olympics were sacred to the Greeks, a place where athletes tested their mettle. But Nero wasn't about to let tradition stand in the way of his glory. Armed with a specially designed 10-horse chariot, which, by the way, he couldn't control, Nero took to the track. As you might guess, he didn't exactly finish the race. He fell off and had to be helped back on. But here's the kicker: Nero still won. The judges, perhaps swayed by the intimidating presence of an emperor, declared him the victor. Talk about a participation trophy. These escapades weren't just about personal glory. They had a hefty price tag that drained Rome's coffers faster than a centurion on payday. Nero's artistic pursuits were funded by the Roman treasury, and let's just say the empire's accountants were having a hard time keeping a straight face. The lavish games, extravagant props, and over-the-top costumes required a constant flow of cash. Nero's spending habits reached such heights that he reportedly had to devalue the Roman currency by reducing the silver content in coins, a move that pleased precisely no one. Nero's theatrical ambitions also came with a social cost. The Senate's unease grew into outright hostility. They saw Nero's antics as not just embarrassing, but dangerous. An emperor more concerned with applause than administration was a ticking time bomb. The political landscape of Rome was as volatile as the pyrotechnics at one of Nero's shows, and the Senate knew it all too well. They began to question Nero's ability to lead, and whispers of dissent turned into murmurs of conspiracy. Yet, amidst all this chaos, Nero's love for the arts couldn't be curbed. He embodied the classic dilemma of a leader torn between duty and desire, a tale as old as time, yet endlessly fascinating. Nero's performances were a reflection of his desire to be adored, not just feared. They also showed his belief that culture and art could elevate his legacy beyond mere politics. Whether this was visionary or delusional is up for debate, but one thing is clear: Nero was a man who refused to be boxed in by convention. As we delve deeper into Nero's reign, remember that his love for the arts wasn't just a personal quirk. It was a pivotal part of his story. It shaped his policies, strained his relationships, and ultimately contributed to his downfall. But let's not rush to the end just yet. There are more acts in Nero's tragic opera, and the curtain is far from falling. Stay tuned as we explore the scandals, conspiracies, and cataclysms that would define the final chapters of Nero's reign. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next in this Roman drama, as Nero's operatic escapades continue to play out like a never-ending reality show. The Roman Empire was about to face a disaster so monumental it would burn its way into the history books, literally. Enter the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, a blaze that engulfed the city for 9 days, leaving behind a trail of ashes, ruins, and some of the most enduring myths about Emperor Nero. First, let's tackle the infamous image of Nero fiddling while Rome burned. Spoiler alert, fiddles didn't even exist back then. That's right, the violin was centuries away from its debut. What Nero may have been playing, if anything, was a lyre, but even that detail is suspect. The story of Nero fiddling is more likely a creative embellishment by later historians looking to paint Nero as the ultimate villain. The truth, Nero wasn't strumming a tune while chaos reigned. He was, in fact, at his villa in Antium, roughly 35 miles from Rome, when the fire started. That's like blaming someone for not stopping a neighborhood barbecue from getting out of hand while they are on a beach holiday. When Nero got word of the disaster, he rushed back to Rome, and here's where the plot thickens. Far from being indifferent, Nero actually opened up his palaces to shelter the displaced and arranged for emergency food supplies to be distributed, which sounds more like disaster management than disconnection from reality. But here's where Nero's actions get a little murky. After the flames were finally extinguished, he saw an opportunity to rebuild Rome, not just as it was, but as a grander, more magnificent city, his kind of city. Cue the urban renewal projects. Nero launched an ambitious reconstruction plan that involved wider streets, new public buildings, and of course, a lavish personal palace known as the Domus Aurea, or the Golden House. This wasn't just a home, it was a statement piece, complete with opulent gardens, an artificial lake, and a massive statue of Nero himself. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a billionaire's mega mansion, except funded by the public purse. Nero's reconstruction efforts were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they aimed to prevent future fires and beautify the city. On the other, they required a mountain of money, which meant raising taxes and seizing land, making Nero about as popular as a tax audit. The economic impact was significant, straining the coffers and the patience of the Roman populace. Suddenly, the emperor who once cut taxes found himself on the wrong side of public opinion. But Nero's woes didn't end with financial strain. Enter the Christians, a relatively new religious group in Rome, already viewed with suspicion for their monotheistic beliefs and secretive gatherings. Nero needed a scapegoat for the fire, and the Christians fit the bill. Accusing them of arson not only diverted blame from himself, but also served as a convenient way to clamp down on a group that challenged Roman religious norms. Cue a wave of brutal persecutions, executions, tortures, and all the grim trappings of Roman justice. The political and social implications of this decision were colossal. Nero's targeting of Christians marked one of the first significant clashes between the Roman state and this burgeoning religious movement. In a twist of fate, his persecution would inadvertently strengthen the resolve of the Christians, turning them into martyrs and sowing seeds for a faith that would eventually reshape the empire. Yet, despite the grandiosity of Nero's plans and the brutality of his scapegoating, the fire marked the beginning of the end for his reign. The Senate, already agitated by his theatrical exploits, saw his actions as a sign of increasing tyranny and detachment from Roman values. Nero's approval ratings were tanking faster than a lead anchor in the Tiber. Whispers of conspiracy grew louder, and his circle of trusted advisors began to thin. In the aftermath of the fire, Nero's grip on the empire weakened. His once grand vision of a reimagined Rome was overshadowed by public resentment and political strife. The emperor who wanted to be remembered as a patron of the arts and a visionary builder found his reputation scorched by the flames of public opinion. The Great Fire had not only reshaped the physical landscape of Rome, but also set the stage for the downfall of its most infamous ruler. As ashes settled and the smoke cleared, Nero's legacy was left as charred as the city he sought to rebuild. Yet, the story doesn't end here. Nero's reign still had a few more acts to play out, full of intrigue, betrayal, and dramatic twists worthy of the grandest Roman tragedies. So, stay tuned, because the curtain hasn't quite fallen on this emperor's chaotic saga. As the embers of the great fire of Rome cooled, Nero's reign morphed into a veritable trial by fire, complete with all the paranoia and power plays one might expect from a blockbuster political thriller. With the city smoldering and his popularity nosediving, Nero's grip on power became as slippery as a Roman eel, and his actions increasingly erratic. Let's talk about the Peasonian conspiracy, because what's a tyrannical reign without a good old-fashioned plot to assassinate the emperor? This conspiracy, named after Gaius Calpurnius Piso, aimed to restore some semblance of sanity to Roman governance. Piso, a senator with a reputation for charm and a knack for political maneuvering, became the figurehead of a broad coalition of disgruntled senators, equestrians, and perhaps most surprisingly, members of Nero's own household. The conspiracy brewed in 65 AD, fueled by Nero's increasingly despotic behavior and a senate that had reached its boiling point. Now, if you're picturing a clandestine meeting of toga-wearing rebels plotting in the shadows of a dimly lit villa, you're not far off. The plan was audacious: eliminate Nero and install Piso as emperor. But like many grand schemes, it was undone by human folly. Enter Militius, a freedman with an ear for intrigue and a nose for self-preservation. Discovering the conspiracy, he promptly blew the whistle, eager to curry favor with Nero and save his own skin. Nero's response was swift and brutal. The crackdown was a masterclass in Machiavellian retribution, as more than 40 conspirators met their fate, including Seneca, Nero's former tutor and advisor. Seneca's forced suicide was a particularly bitter end, given his early counsel had kept Nero's rule relatively stable. But in the cutthroat world of Roman politics, loyalty was as fragile as papyrus, and Seneca was just another casualty of Nero's paranoia. Meanwhile, Nero's penchant for the extravagant didn't do Rome's economy any favors. The man spent like the empire had a money tree in the backyard of the Domus Aurea. His lavish tastes extended to everything from opulent banquets that rivaled any celebrity wedding to costly military campaigns that drained the treasury quicker than a leaky aqueduct. And let's not forget his obsession with the arts, which was less about cultural patronage and more about feeding his insatiable ego. As Nero's spending spree continued unabated, the economic consequences were dire. The empire's finances were stretched thinner than a Roman centurion's patience, leading to increased taxes and devaluation of currency. Nero's attempts to plug the financial black hole included confiscating the estates of wealthy citizens under the guise of treason, an action that won him no friends among Rome's elite. Yet, Nero's extravagance wasn't just financial. It extended to his military endeavors. In 66 AD, he embarked on a campaign in Armenia, hoping to secure a diplomatic victory by installing a client king. But this wasn't a cheap undertaking. The campaign required a substantial military presence and logistical support, adding further strain to Rome's already taxed resources. The Senate, watching their coffers bleed dry, grew increasingly restless. Nero's military ambitions seemed less about securing Rome's borders and more about securing his own reputation. Politically, Nero's position was shakier than a rickety Roman bridge. The Senate, which had tolerated his eccentricities, found his despotic tendencies harder to swallow. Nero's habit of micromanaging and his increasing reliance on sycophantic advisors alienated many senators who longed for a return to the glory days of republican governance. The whispers of dissent turned into open grumbling, and the Senate's discontent simmered like a pot ready to boil over. In this climate of fear and resentment, Nero's actions only served to fan the flames of opposition. He continued to indulge in public performances, a stark reminder of his disconnect from the gravitas expected of an emperor. His theatrics, once seen as a harmless quirk, now seemed a dangerous distraction from the pressing issues at hand. The political machinations that would eventually lead to Nero's downfall were already in motion, with the Senate and other power players maneuvering to limit his influence. Nero, increasingly isolated and unable to distinguish friend from foe, became consumed by paranoia, a trait that history tells us is never a good look for a leader. The emperor who had once mingled with the masses and styled himself a man of the people was now a shadow of his former self, trapped in the gilded cage of his own making. As Rome teetered on the brink of chaos, Nero's once bright star began to dim. The emperor who had fancied himself a god among men was now a man among wolves, his reign a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrosive power of fear. Yet, even as the tide turned against him, Nero remained defiant, his story far from over. So, as we leave Nero pondering his next move, remember this. The saga of Rome's most infamous emperor is a cautionary tale about the perils of power, the price of paranoia, and the inevitable fall from grace. But don't pack your bags yet. There's still more drama to unfold in the final act of Nero's reign. Stay tuned for the concluding chapters of this epic historical drama, where we'll witness the ultimate unraveling of an emperor who dared to defy convention and paid the ultimate price. As Nero pondered his next move, it was clear that the winds of change were blowing with the force of a Roman gale. In 68 AD, the empire that had once trembled under his extravagant rule was now standing on the brink of rebellion. Enter Galba, a seasoned governor of Hispania Tarraconensis, whose name would soon become a rallying cry for those disillusioned by Nero's reign. Galba wasn't just any governor. He was a man with a pedigree as Roman as it gets, having once served under the venerable Augustus himself. When news of discontent in the provinces reached him, Galba saw an opportunity to step into the fray. With Julianus, the governor of Lusitania, modern-day Portugal, throwing his support behind him, Galba declared himself the head of a revolt. He was betting on the Roman people's yearning for stability and sanity over Nero's circus act of a reign. Meanwhile, in Rome, the Senate was sharpening its knives. Having tolerated Nero's antics for far too long, they were ready to pounce at the first sign of credible opposition. And what better opportunity than a rebellion led by Galba, a man whose mere name invoked memories of a more disciplined era. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy, an act that was as much about self-preservation as it was about justice. They needed a scapegoat for the empire's woes, and Nero, with his theatrical inclinations and fiscal irresponsibility, fit the part like a toga. Nero, ever the performer, was caught off guard by this twist in his Roman drama. His inner circle, once a mix of sycophants and reluctant allies, began to crumble faster than a wet biscuit. Even the Praetorian Guard, the elite force sworn to protect the emperor, turned their backs on him in favor of Galba. It was like a scene from a tragic play, with Nero realizing too late that the applause had stopped and the audience had left the theater. In a desperate bid to salvage his reign, Nero attempted to rally whatever support he could muster, but the political landscape had shifted irrevocably. His appeals fell on deaf ears, and those who once stood by him now saw the writing on the wall, or perhaps the graffiti on the Roman Forum. With each passing day, his options dwindled, leaving him with nothing but his own hubris for company. Exiled from his palace, Nero found himself a fugitive in the city he once ruled. Fleeing to a villa on the outskirts of Rome, he was accompanied by a small band of loyalists, hardly the entourage of an emperor. It was here, in this secluded hideaway, that Nero's story reached its tragic finale. As Roman soldiers closed in, he was faced with the grim reality of his situation. The emperor who had once commanded legions was now cornered, his fate sealed by the very forces he had tried to charm and control. In his final moments, Nero's flair for the dramatic didn't desert him, uttering the famous last words, "Qualis arif experio," or "What an artist dies in me." He took his own life, a solitary act of defiance against a world that had turned its back on him. Whether these words were genuine or apocryphal, they capture the essence of a man who saw himself as more than just an emperor. He was an artist, a visionary, and in his own eyes, a misunderstood genius. With Nero's death, the Roman Empire plunged into a year of chaos, known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Galba's ascension, swift though it was, marked only the beginning of a turbulent period where power changed hands at a pace that would make modern political dramas look like slow motion. The empire was a ship without a captain, tossed about by the currents of ambition and betrayal. It was a stark reminder that the stability of Rome was as fragile as a clay pot. Reflecting on Nero's legacy, it's easy to get swept up in the myth, the mad emperor who sang while Rome burned. But the reality is far more complex. Nero's reign was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the seductive allure of absolute authority. He was a ruler who dared to defy convention, yet his inability to balance artistic ambition with political responsibility led to his undoing. Economically, his reign strained Rome's resources, leaving a legacy of financial instability that his successors had to navigate. Politically, his self-indulgence and paranoia alienated the very institutions that were designed to support him. Socially, his persecution of Christians set a precedent for religious intolerance that would echo through the annals of history. Yet, amid the chaos and calamity, Nero's story is also a testament to the enduring human desire for expression and identity. He was a man who wanted to be more than just a ruler. He wanted to be remembered. And remembered he was, if not for his artistic pursuits, then certainly for the spectacle of his downfall. In the grand tapestry of history, Nero's reign reminds us that the line between genius and madness is often as thin as a Roman coin. His story, full of hubris and humiliation, serves as a timeless cautionary tale of ambition unbridled by wisdom. As we close the chapter on Nero, we see not just the fall of an emperor, but the enduring lesson that history often holds a mirror to our own times, reflecting the timeless truths of power, pride, and the human condition.